On the day of my son's wedding, my in-laws did not just mock me. They tried to destroy me in front of 500 people. They pointed at my old suit and called me trash. They laughed at the life savings I had gifted the couple. My son's fiancée stood there and smiled as her father humiliated the man who raised her future husband. I stood up and stopped the wedding. My son looked at them and chose his dignity over their money. They thought they were crushing a poor, helpless old man. They had no idea that the man they called trash was actually a billionaire. My entire life changed forever in that single moment. My name is Lester Hammond. I am 68 years old. Most people look at me and see a man who has been beaten down by life. They see my calloused hands, my graying hair, and the way I walk with a slight limp from 40 years of hauling heavy bags. They see the 1990 Ford pickup truck I drive, which rattles when the engine turns over. They assume I am destitute. They assume I am uneducated. They assume I am weak. For a long time, I let them believe that. Silence is a powerful weapon when your enemies are loud. But last Saturday, at the Grand Ballroom of the Plaza Hotel in New York City, my silence finally ended. I arrived at the venue wearing my best suit. It was a charcoal gray two-piece I had bought 20 years ago for my wife's funeral. I had pressed it myself that morning, making sure the creases were sharp. I polished my shoes until they shone. I wanted to look respectable for Tyrell. My son was marrying into the Kensington family. They were old money, or at least they pretended to be. They were the kind of people who put their names on buildings and looked through anyone who did not have a trust fund. I walked toward the entrance of the ballroom. The air smelled of expensive lilies and old money arrogance. Richard Kensington was waiting by the door. He was a tall man with silver hair and a tuxedo that probably cost more than my truck. He saw me approaching, and his smile vanished. He stepped in front of me, blocking my path to the main seating area. He looked me up and down with a sneer that made my skin crawl. He did not offer his hand. He simply pointed a manicured finger toward the far back corner of the room. "Lester, you are not sitting at the family table." I looked at him confused. "I am the father of the groom. Tyrell is my only son." Richard laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "That is exactly why you are not sitting with us. Look at you. That suit smells like mothballs and desperation. I have senators and CEOs at the front tables. I will not have you ruining the aesthetic of my daughter's wedding." He leaned in closer. His breath smelled of scotch and mints. "You are sitting at table 45. It is right next to the kitchen service doors and the restrooms. It is where you belong, Lester. Out of sight, out of mind. And do me a favor. Try not to speak to anyone important. I do not want your smell ruining my 1982 vintage wine." I felt a fire ignite in my chest. I wanted to grab him by his silk lapels. I wanted to tell him exactly who I was and what I owned. But I looked across the room and saw Tyrell. My son looked nervous but happy. He was adjusting his tie and looking for me. If I caused a scene now, I would ruin his moment. I swallowed my pride. It tasted like ash. I nodded slowly and walked to table 45. The table was exactly as Richard had described. Every time the kitchen doors swung open, the smell of steamed vegetables and dish soap wafted over me. The waiters rushed past, bumping my chair without apologizing. I was the only person sitting there. It was a table for castaways. I sat with my back to the wall and watched the room fill up. The guests were a sea of white faces, diamonds, and designer gowns. They laughed and clinked their crystal glasses. They looked at me with curiosity and then quickly looked away, as if poverty were a contagious disease. The ceremony began. I watched from the back as my son exchanged vows with Victoria. She looked beautiful in a dress that likely cost $50,000, but her eyes were cold. She did not look at Tyrell with love. She looked at him like he was an acquisition, a pet she had decided to adopt. Tyrell looked for me in the front row. I saw the confusion on his face when he saw the empty chair next to his mother's empty seat. He scanned the room until he found me in the shadows by the kitchen. His face fell. He started to step toward me, but Victoria grabbed his arm. I saw her whisper something to him. Her nails dug into his bicep. She was not comforting him. She was restraining him. The reception dinner began. The noise level rose. Richard Kensington walked onto the stage. The spotlight hit him, reflecting off his gold cufflinks. He tapped the microphone. The room went silent. He smiled that shark smile. "Welcome, everyone. Tonight is a night of charity. Tonight, the Kensington family opens its arms to welcome a new member." The crowd chuckled politely. I gripped the edge of the tablecloth. Richard continued. We all know that Tyrell comes from humble beginnings. Very humble. In fact, looking at his father back there by the toilets, I would say tragic beginnings. The spotlight operator swung the beam of light across the room. It landed on me. I was blinded. I blinked against the glare, feeling 500 pairs of eyes drilling into me. The laughter in the room grew louder. It was not polite anymore. It was cruel. Richard reached into his pocket and pulled out a piece of paper. It was the check I had given Tyrell the night before. I had given him $50,000. It was cash I had withdrawn from a small local account I kept for emergencies. I told Tyrell it was my life savings. I wanted him to think I was giving him everything I had. Richard held the check up to the light. Lester here gave the couple a gift. $50,000. Can you imagine? He probably had to sell his kidney and mortgage his shack to scrape this together. The laughter roared. Richard shook his head, feigning pity. I almost tore it up. I really did. It is pocket change to us. It wouldn't even cover the flower arrangement on this stage. But then I thought, no, let us keep it. Let us accept this cute little contribution. It is the best he could do. Today, we are not just gaining a son-in-law. We are running a rescue operation. We are lifting this trash up from the gutter and giving it a Kensington polish. The word hung in the air. Trash. He had called me trash. He had called my son trash. I looked at Tyrell. He was shaking. His fists were clenched at his sides. His face was a mask of agony. He looked at Victoria, begging her with his eyes to stop her father. He needed her to stand up for him. He needed her to say that his father was a good man. He needed her to show even an ounce of respect. Victoria did not stand up. She did not take the microphone. She covered her mouth with her hand and giggled. She laughed along with them. That laughter broke my son. I saw the light go out in his eyes. The illusion of love he had been living in shattered instantly. He looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time. He saw the cruelty behind the makeup. He saw the predator behind the smile. Then he looked at me. I was still sitting in the blinding spotlight. I did not look away. I did not hang my head. I sat up straight. I locked eyes with my son. I gave him a single, slow nod. It was a command. It was permission. It was a reminder of who he was. Tyrell took a deep breath. He pulled his arm away from Victoria's grip. "Where are you going?" she hissed. Her voice was audible over the dying laughter. "Sit down, Tyrell. Do not embarrass me." Tyrell ignored her. He walked toward the stage. He did not run. He marched. His steps were heavy and deliberate on the marble floor. The guests fell silent as he approached. Richard smiled, thinking Tyrell was coming to thank him. He held out the microphone, expecting a submissive speech of gratitude. Tyrell snatched the microphone from Richard's hand. The feedback shrieked through the speakers, making everyone wince. Richard looked confused. Tyrell turned to face the crowd. He looked at the sea of wealthy, arrogant faces. Then he turned to look at Victoria, who was standing frozen at the head table. "I thought I was the luckiest man alive," Tyrell said. His voice was steady. It was cold. "I thought I was marrying into a family of class. I thought money brought dignity, but I was wrong." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the marriage license they were supposed to sign later that evening. "You think my father is trash because he wears an old suit? You think he is trash because he works with his hands? You think you are better than him because you were born with a silver spoon in your mouth?" Tyrell ripped the marriage license in half. The sound of tearing paper was loud in the silent room. He ripped it again and again until it was nothing but confetti. He threw the pieces onto the floor at Richard's feet. "My father is twice the man you will ever be, Richard. He taught me honor. He taught me respect. He taught me that you judge a man by his character, not his bank account. You have money, but you are poor in every way that matters." He turned to Victoria. "And you laughed. You stood there and laughed while your father spit on my family. I would rather be the son of a garbage man for the rest of my life than spend 1 minute as the husband of a gold-digging coward." Tyrell dropped the microphone. It hit the floor with a heavy thud. "The wedding is canceled." The room exploded into chaos. I stood up from table 45. I buttoned my jacket. I walked toward my son. I was not the poor old man in the corner anymore. I was a father coming to collect his soldier, and the war had just begun. The slap echoed through the ballroom like a gunshot. Victoria did not hesitate. Her hand connected with Tyrell's cheek with a force that snapped his head to the side. The impact left a burning red handprint on his dark skin instantly. It was the physical manifestation of her contempt. She did not scream in sorrow. She screamed in rage. "You ruin everything," she shrieked. "You are nothing but a pathetic loser, just like your father." Before Tyrell could even process the assault, Patricia Kensington lunged at me. She was a woman who prided herself on her manicured elegance, but in that moment she was feral, her long nails aimed for my eyes. She was a wild animal cornered by the truth. I caught her wrists before she could claw my face. Her expensive perfume was suffocating. She spat at me. "Get your filthy hands off me, you animal," she hissed. Security guards swarmed us instantly. They did not come for the woman assaulting her fiancé. They did not come for the woman trying to scratch an old man's eyes out. They came for us. 3 large men in black suits grabbed Tyrell. They twisted his arms behind his back with unnecessary force. Another 2 grabbed me by the shoulders of my old suit. They hauled us backward away from the stage, away from the stunned guests. Richard Kensington stood on the podium, his face purple with fury. He pointed a shaking finger at us as we were dragged toward the exit. "I am going to destroy you," he bellowed. His voice boomed over the speakers. "You think you can walk away from this contract? I will sue you for every penny you will ever earn. This wedding cost $200,000. You are going to pay me back double for breach of contract and emotional damages. I will garnish your wages until you are 90. I will put you in jail." The guests parted like the Red Sea as we were shoved through the crowd. I saw their faces. They looked at us with disgust. To them, we were not victims of abuse. We were the disruptors. We were the stain on their perfect evening. We were the trash being taken out. The security guards threw us out the side doors onto the cold pavement of 58th Street. The heavy metal doors slammed shut behind us, sealing off the warmth and the light. We were alone on the sidewalk. The contrast was jarring. Inside it was champagne and silk. Outside it was gray concrete and the smell of exhaust fumes. Then the sky opened up. It started to rain. It was a cold, biting rain that soaked through my thin suit in seconds. It matched the misery of the moment perfectly. We walked in silence to where I had parked my truck. It was blocks away because the valet had refused to park it. The 1990 Ford F-150 sat under a flickering street lamp. Its paint was peeling. The bumper was held on by wire. It looked like a piece of junk. Tyrell looked at the truck and then he looked at me. His legs gave out. He collapsed onto the wet pavement, leaning his back against the rusted wheel well of the truck. He buried his face in his hands. His shoulders shook with violent sobs. The sound of his crying was worse than the insults inside the ballroom. It was the sound of a man who believed his life was over. I stood over him, letting the rain wash down my face. I did not touch him yet. He needed to let it out. "I am so sorry, Dad," he choked out between sobs. "I am so sorry. I ruined everything." He looked up at me. His eyes were red and swollen. Rainwater dripped from his nose and chin, mixing with his tears. "Richard is right. I am going to be in debt for the rest of my life. $200,000. Dad, I do not have that kind of money. You do not have that kind of money. He is going to sue me. He is going to ruin my career. I will never get another job in this city. They will blacklist me." He hit the asphalt with his fist. The skin on his knuckles split, but he did not seem to feel it. "I should have listened to you. I was so stupid. I thought if I loved her enough it would not matter where I came from, but I was just kidding myself. I am just a burden to you. I have always been a burden. You worked your fingers to the bone to raise me, and this is how I repay you. By bringing shame on us. By getting us sued by billionaires." He pulled at his hair. "I wish I had never been born. You deserve a better son. You deserve a son who could protect you, not one who gets you thrown out like garbage." My heart broke for him. He saw himself through their eyes. He saw himself as small and powerless. He thought the truck behind him was a symbol of his failure. He thought my old suit was a badge of his inadequacy. He had no idea that he was the heir to an empire. I decided it was time. The charade had served its purpose. I had seen the truth of the Kensingtons, and I had seen the integrity of my son. There was no need to pretend anymore. I did not offer him empty words of comfort. I did not tell him it would be okay. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my keys. I unlocked the passenger door of the truck. I reached under the seat and pulled out an old leather satchel. Tyrell watched me through the rain, confused. He expected a hug or a lecture. He did not expect me to start rummaging through a bag. I pulled out an iPad. It looked old. The case was worn and scratched. It looked like something I had picked up at a pawn shop for $50. But appearances are deceiving. That is the first lesson of my life. I pressed my thumb against the home button. The screen lit up instantly, recognizing my biometric print. It was military-grade encryption disguised as obsolete technology. "Get up, son," I said. My voice was different. It was not the voice of the weary, retired sanitation worker. It was the voice of the chairman of Hammond Holdings. It was deep, steady, and commanded authority. Tyrell blinked. He slowly stood up, wiping the water from his face. He looked at me wary. "Dad, what are you doing? We need to figure out a lawyer. We need to figure out how to pay them so they do not put us in jail." "Look at this," I commanded. I shoved the iPad into his chest. He took it automatically. He looked down at the screen. I had opened my primary banking app. It was a direct link to my secure account in Zurich. Read the number Tyrell. Read it out loud. He squinted at the screen. The rain droplets distorted the text, but the numbers were big and green. 1,200,000, he started. Then he stopped. He blinked. He wiped the screen with his wet sleeve. He looked closer. "Dad, is this a glitch?" "Read the number," I repeated. 1,200,000,000, $450,000. He looked up at me. His mouth hung open. He looked back at the screen. He tapped it, thinking it was a screenshot or a fake app. It responded to his touch, showing the live transaction history. Inflows of millions of dollars from waste management contracts across 3 states. Dividends from recycling patents. Real estate yields. "This is real," he whispered. "Dad, whose money is this?" "It is mine," I said, "which means it is yours." He shook his head, backing away from me until he hit the side of the truck again. "I do not understand. You were a garbage man. You worked double shifts. We ate beans and rice. You drive this truck. Dad, you count coupons at the grocery store." I stepped closer to him. I placed my hands on his shoulders. I felt him trembling. "I was never just a garbage man, Tyrell. I was an observer. I saw what people threw away. I saw value where others saw waste. 40 years ago, I started buying the landfills I worked on. I bought the trucks. I developed the recycling technology that every major city on the East Coast uses today. I built an empire on the things people like Richard Kensington refuse to look at." I gestured to the city skyline glowing in the distance. "I own the company that picks up the trash from the Plaza Hotel. I own the land underneath the Kensington Logistics Warehouse in New Jersey. I own the debt on the building Richard lives in." Tyrell stared at me. The fear in his eyes was replaced by shock and then slowly a dawning realization. "You are a billionaire." "I am." "Why?" he asked, his voice cracking. "Why did you live like this? Why did you let me believe we were poor?" "Because I wanted you to become a man, not a parasite," I said firmly. "I saw what money did to the people I did business with. I saw their children turn into soft, entitled creatures like Victoria. I wanted you to build your own character. I wanted you to know the value of $1. I wanted you to know how to work. And tonight you proved that you learned those lessons. You stood up to them, not because you had a safety net, but because you had honor. That is worth more than the $1 billion on that screen." I took the iPad back from him and tossed it onto the seat of the truck. "Now wipe your face. Stop crying. We do not have time for tears." But Richard Tyrell stammered. He said he would sue us. He said he would destroy me. I laughed. It was a cold, hard sound. Richard Kensington is a man standing on a trap door, and I am the one holding the lever. He wants to talk about destroying people. He has no idea who he just declared war on. He thinks he is a shark because he swims in a pool. He just jumped into the ocean with a megalodon. I opened the driver's side door. The hinges creaked. "Get in the truck, Tyrell. We are going home. We are going to the bunker. I have a lawyer waiting for us. His name is Goldberg, and he has been waiting 20 years for me to give the order to eat someone alive." Tyrell stood there for a second longer, looking at the luxury hotel and then looking at me. He straightened his spine. He wiped the last of the tears from his eyes. The despair was gone. In its place was a spark of anger and a spark of hope. He walked around the truck and climbed in. I started the engine. It roared to life with a cough and a sputter. To anyone watching, it was just 2 poor men driving away in a piece of junk. They did not know that inside that cabin, the board of directors of Hammond Holdings had just called an emergency meeting. I pulled out into traffic. The rain was coming down harder now, washing the grime off the city streets. "I do not pick up trash anymore, son," I said, staring straight ahead at the road. I own the people who make it, and tonight we are going hunting. We drove in silence to the edge of town where the pavement turns to gravel. My house sat on a small, overgrown lot surrounded by trees that blocked the view from the road. It was a small wooden shack with peeling white paint and a porch that leaned dangerously to the left. To the outside world, it was the home of a man who barely scraped by. To Tyrell, it was the only home he had ever known, the place where we ate canned soup when times were tough. He looked at the house and then at me with confusion still clouding his eyes. He did not understand why a billionaire would choose to live in a place where the wind whistled through the cracks in the walls. I parked the truck and signaled for him to follow me. We walked inside. The air smelled of old paper and dust. I led him to the master bedroom. In the corner stood a heavy oak wardrobe that had belonged to my grandmother. It was filled with old moth-eaten coats. Tyrell watched as I pushed the coats aside and placed my hand against the back panel of the wood. A hidden scanner read my palm print. There was a low mechanical hum, and the heavy wardrobe swung outward on silent hydraulic hinges. Behind the wood was a door of reinforced steel. I typed a code into the keypad. The door hissed open, revealing a staircase bathed in cool blue light. "Welcome to the real headquarters of Hammond Holdings," I said. We descended the stairs. The air here was filtered and cool. The room below the shack was a fortress. It was lined with servers and monitors displaying live feeds from waste processing plants across the eastern seaboard. Maps glowed on the walls showing shipping routes and logistics networks. Sitting at a glass desk in the center of the room was a man who looked like he had been carved out of granite. He wore a suit that cost more than the house above us. He was bald with eyes that missed nothing. This was Goldberg. They called him the Great White Shark of Wall Street. He was the only man I trusted with my empire because I had saved his life 20 years ago. Goldberg stood up as we entered. He did not smile. He did not offer condolences. He simply nodded. "The board is ready, Lester," he said. His voice was a deep rumble. "I have already begun the valuation of Kensington Logistics. It is worse than we thought." Tyrell looked around the room, his mouth agape. He looked at the screens showing trucks moving in real time. He saw the tickers displaying the current market value of recycled copper and lithium. "Dad," he whispered, "what is all this?" "This is the business, son," I replied, walking over to the main console. "You think waste is just trash bags on a curb. Waste is energy. Waste is raw materials. Hammond Holdings controls 60% of the industrial waste disposal market on the East Coast. Every time a hospital throws away a syringe, every time a factory dumps sludge, every time a building is demolished, I get paid. We process the things society is afraid to touch, and we make a fortune doing it." I turned to Goldberg. "Update me." Goldberg tapped a key, and a file appeared on the huge main screen. "Richard Kensington is overleveraged. He bet heavily on cryptocurrency and lost. He has taken out high-interest loans to cover payroll. His creditors are circling. He needed this marriage to merge his logistics network with the tech patents your son holds. Without Tyrell, he is dead in the water." Before I could respond, Tyrell's phone began to vibrate violently in his pocket. It buzzed once, then twice, then a dozen times in rapid succession. It sounded like an alarm. Tyrell pulled it out. His face went pale as he read the screen. "It is an email from my boss," he said, his voice trembling. "I have been fired. Effective immediately. They are citing a violation of the morality clause in my contract." He looked up at me with panic rising in his eyes. "Richard sits on the board of that company. He made them fire me." Another notification chimed. It was an urgent email from a law firm. Tyrell opened it, and his knees almost gave way. "It is a summons, Dad. They are suing me. They are suing me for $5 million for emotional distress and reputational damage to the Kensington family. $5 million. I will go to prison. I will never work again." The phone buzzed again. This time it was a text message. Tyrell looked at it and dropped the phone on the desk as if it had burned him. He backed away, breathing hard. "Read it," I commanded. "I cannot," he choked out. Goldberg picked up the phone. He read the message aloud, his voice devoid of emotion. "It is from Victoria. It says transfer $500,000 to this account within the hour, or I release the private video we made last month. I will post it on every social media platform. I will send it to your future employers. I will ruin you." Tyrell collapsed into one of the leather chairs. He put his head between his knees, hyperventilating. "I have to go," he gasped. "I have to run. I can go to Canada. I can disappear. Dad, give me some cash. I cannot stay here. They are going to destroy me. They have power. They have lawyers. I am just a nobody. He stood up and started moving toward the stairs, his eyes wild with fear. He was broken. He was exactly where Richard and Victoria wanted him to be, terrified and running. I moved faster than a man my age should move. I intercepted him at the base of the stairs. I grabbed him by the lapels of his soaking wet jacket. "Look at me," I shouted. He tried to pull away. "I have to go. Dad, let me go." I slapped him. It was not a hard slap, but it was sharp. It was enough to snap him out of his panic. The sound echoed off the steel walls of the bunker. "Stop it," I ordered. "Stop acting like a victim. Stop acting like a poor man." I shoved him back toward the desk. "You are running from paper tigers, Tyrell. You are running from people who are drowning and trying to use you as a life raft. You want to run away. That is what the old Tyrell would do. That is what the garbage man's son would do. But you are not that man anymore." I walked over to the main screen and pointed at the financial data Goldberg had pulled up. Richard Kensington thinks he has power because he can fire you. He thinks he has power because he can sue you. But power is not about making noise. Power is about ownership. And right now, I have enough liquid capital in this room to buy his entire life 10 times over. I turned to Goldberg. "How much debt is Kensington Logistics carrying?" $50 million in secured loans, Goldberg replied, and another $10 million in high-risk unsecured credit. "Who holds the paper on the secured loans?" "First Citibank," Goldberg said. I looked at Tyrell. "Watch this, son. Watch how the world really works." I looked back at Goldberg. "Call the chairman of First City. Tell him Hammond Holdings wants to buy the entire Kensington debt portfolio. Offer him 100 cents on the dollar if he closes the deal tonight. Tell him we want the mortgage on Richard's mansion included in the package. We want the loans on his cars. We want the lien on his office building. We want everything." Goldberg allowed a rare, thin smile to cross his lips. "That will make us his only creditor. We will have the right to call in the loans immediately due to the breach of contract clause regarding financial stability." "Do it," I said. But Dad, Tyrell stammered. "That will cost millions. Why would you spend that much money on trash?" "Because I am a sanitation expert," I said coldly. "And when you find toxic waste, you do not run from it. You contain it, you neutralize it, and then you bury it." I walked over to Tyrell and handed him his phone back. "Delete the text from Victoria. Do not reply. Do not block her. Let her think you are scared. Let her think she has won. Silence is the loudest noise you can make right now." Goldberg was already on the phone speaking in rapid-fire legal terms, initiating the transfer of funds. The printers in the corner of the room whirred to life, spitting out contracts and acquisition forms. I poured 2 glasses of cheap whiskey from a bottle I kept in the desk drawer. I handed one to Tyrell. "Drink this," I said. "You are going to need it." Tyrell took the glass. His hands were still shaking, but he was standing tall. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now we wait," I said, taking a sip of the burning liquid. "We wait for the sun to come up. By the time Richard Kensington pours his morning coffee, he will not own the cup he is drinking from. He will not own the chair he is sitting in. He will be living in my house, and he will not even know it yet." I looked at the screens at the empire I had built from the refuse of others. They wanted to play a game of class, I said, my voice low and dangerous. They wanted to treat people like commodities. Fine, I just bought them. Tomorrow, we go to collect. I left Tyrell in the safety of the bunker, surrounded by screens and the comforting hum of servers. He wanted to come with me, but I refused. He was too raw, too emotional. He would have broken character. I needed to be alone for this performance. I needed to be the Lester Hammond they thought they knew. I went to the closet in the hallway of the shack and pulled out my old work uniform. It was a neon orange jumpsuit stained with grease and oil and things I preferred not to identify. It had hung there for years, a relic of a past life, but tonight it was my costume. It was my armor. I put it on over my clothes. It smelled of stale sweat and landfill gas. Perfect. I drove the battered Ford to the Kensington estate in Upper Saddle River. The rain had turned into a steady, freezing drizzle. The house sat on 5 acres of manicured lawn behind wrought iron gates that were twice the height of my truck. It looked like a fortress built to keep reality out. I pressed the intercom button. The camera lens stared down at me like a mechanical eye. "It is Lester Hammond," I said into the speaker. My voice was low and trembling. "I want to apologize. Please do not put my son in jail." The speaker crackled. Richard Kensington's voice came through, dripping with amusement. Well, well, the garbage man has come to beg. Please, Mr. Kensington, I pleaded. I just want to talk. Wait there, Richard said. I waited. I stood by the gate in the rain. 10 minutes passed, then 20, then an hour. The water soaked through the orange canvas of my jumpsuit. It ran down my neck and into my boots. My shivering was not entirely an act. The cold was biting, but the fire in my belly kept me warm. I knew exactly what he was doing. He was asserting dominance. He was letting the dog wait outside until the master was ready. I stood there staring at the house, memorizing the layout, counting the security cameras, noting the arrogance of a man who makes an enemy wait in the cold. 2 hours passed before the gate buzzed. It did not open fully. Just a small service door to the side clicked unlocked. Come to the back door, the voice on the intercom ordered. Do not you dare track mud into my foyer. I walked up the long driveway, my boots squelching on the wet asphalt. I walked past the 4-car garage, past the fountain that cost more than my first house. I walked around to the service entrance near the kitchen. Richard was waiting there. He was wearing a cashmere sweater and holding a glass of amber liquid. He looked warm. He looked comfortable. He looked at me with a mixture of disgust and delight. You look like a drowned rat. Lester, he sneered. Appropriate. He stepped back and allowed me into the mudroom. It was larger than my living room, lined with custom cabinetry and marble floors. Take off those boots, he commanded. I obeyed. I struggled with the laces, my hands shaking. I placed the muddy boots by the door. I stood there in my wet socks, head bowed, shoulders slumped. I am sorry about the wedding, Mr. Kensington, I stammered. Tyrell is not himself. He is stressed. Please do not sue him. He has nothing. I have nothing. Richard laughed. He gestured for me to follow him. We walked into a massive kitchen with gleaming white countertops and stainless steel appliances that looked like they had never been used. Sitting in a velvet armchair by the bay window was Patricia. She was filing her nails. She did not look up when I entered. Patty, look who decided to visit, Richard said. Patricia looked up. Her eyes narrowed. She looked at the puddle of water forming around my feet. He is dripping on the marble. Richard, she said. Her voice was flat cold. I am sorry, ma'am, I said. I will clean it up. You certainly will, she snapped. She stopped filing her nails. She looked down at her shoes. They were expensive Italian leather heels, cream-colored. There was a tiny speck of dirt on the toe of the left one. Come here, she said. I walked over to her, slowly keeping my head down. My shoes are dirty because of your son, she said. I had to walk through the parking lot to get to the limo because of the scene he caused. My shoes are ruined. I can pay for cleaning, I offered weakly. You cannot afford to pay attention, let alone clean my shoes, she spat. She reached into a basket next to the chair and pulled out a rag. It was a dirty cloth used for polishing silver. She threw it on the floor at my feet. Clean them. I looked at the rag. I looked at her. What I asked, pretending to be confused. Clean the mud off my shoes. Lester, she said. Her eyes were wide with a sick sort of excitement. Get on your knees and clean them. If you do a good job, maybe I will ask Richard to hold off on filing the lawsuit until Monday. Maybe we will let your son stay out of prison for a few more days. This was it. This was the moment they crossed the line from anger to sadism. This was the moment they handed me their souls on a silver platter. I slowly lowered myself to my knees. My old joints cracked. The marble was cold against my legs. I picked up the dirty rag. I reached out and gently began to wipe the pristine leather of her shoe. That is it, she said, letting out a breath. That is where you belong. On your knees, serving your betters. I scrubbed at the invisible dirt. I kept my face turned toward her, my eyes downcast, but the top button of my jumpsuit was facing her directly. The tiny lens of the micro camera was capturing every frame of her face, every twist of her lips, every second of her delight in degrading another human being. You missed a spot, she said, kicking my hand away. Do it again. I did it again. I swallowed the bile rising in my throat. I let the humiliation wash over me, knowing that every second of this was fuel for the fire that would consume them. Suddenly, the door to the hallway banged open. Victoria stormed in. She was wearing a silk robe, her hair wrapped in a towel. She looked at me on the floor and stopped. A cruel smile spread across her face. Well, look at this, she said. Daddy, did you get a new pet? He is begging for his son's life, Victoria, Richard said, taking a sip of his drink. Watch him. Victoria walked over to me. She did not stop. She swung her leg and kicked me hard in the shoulder. The impact knocked me sideways. I fell onto my hip, gasping in pain. It was not an act. Her foot had connected with bone. "Get up, old man," she hissed. I scrambled back to a kneeling position, clutching my shoulder. "Please, Miss Victoria," I said, my voice cracking. "Do not hit me. I will do whatever I want to you," she said, looming over me. "You and your son embarrassed me. You made me look like a fool. Do you know how many followers I lost today? Do you know what people are saying about me?" She reached into the pocket of her robe and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She slapped it onto the coffee table in front of me. "Sign this," she ordered. I looked at the paper. It was handwritten on Kensington stationery. It was a promissory note. "I, Lester Hammond, hereby acknowledge a debt of $500,000 to the Kensington family for damages incurred by my son Tyrell Hammond. I agree to pay this debt in full within 30 days. I looked up at her, my eyes wide with feigned terror. $500,000, I whispered. "Miss, I do not have that kind of money. I drive a 30-year-old truck. I have $40 in my bank account. I cannot sign this. It is impossible." Victoria leaned down. Her face was inches from mine. Her eyes were black pits of malice. "You will sign it," she whispered, "or I will go to the police. For what I asked. We did nothing wrong." She laughed. It was a low, throaty sound. "I will tell them Tyrell hurt me," she said. "I will tell them he forced himself on me. I will tear my robe right now. I will bruise my own arms. I will say he came here tonight and attacked me and you helped him get away. Who do you think they will believe, Lester? The wealthy white woman crying in her mansion, or the angry black man who left her at the altar?" My blood ran cold. This was not just greed. This was evil. This was a willingness to destroy a man's life with a lie so heinous it could never be erased. "Please no," I begged, letting tears spill from my eyes. "Do not do that. He is a good boy. He never touched you." "Then sign the paper," she screamed. "Sign it right now." She threw a pen at me. It clattered on the floor next to the rag. I picked up the pen with a shaking hand. I held it over the paper. I hesitated. "Do it," Richard barked from across the room. "Or I call the sheriff right now." I switched the pen to my left hand. I am right-handed. I have been right-handed for 68 years. But in that moment I became left-handed. I scratched a shaky, illegible scrawl on the signature line. It looked nothing like my real signature. It was the signature of a man under duress. It was the signature of a fraud. I dropped the pen. "There," I sobbed. I signed it. "Please, just leave him alone." Victoria snatched the paper up. She looked at it and smiled triumphantly. She kissed the paper. "See, Daddy," she said. "I told you they would pay." She looked down at me with pure contempt. "Now get out of my house. You smell like garbage." I struggled to my feet. My knees ached. My shoulder throbbed where she had kicked me. I picked up my boots. I did not put them on. I walked to the door in my wet socks, leaving damp footprints on their precious marble. I opened the back door and stepped out into the rain. Remember, Lester, Richard called out after me. 30 days. Or we take the truck, we take the shack, we take everything. I did not look back. I walked down the long driveway into the dark. I walked until I was out of sight of the cameras. I walked until I was back at my truck. I climbed inside and locked the door. The silence of the cab was heavy. I sat there for a moment, breathing hard, letting the adrenaline fade. I reached up and unbuttoned the collar of my jumpsuit. I pulled out the tiny camera unit. The light was blinking green. It had captured everything. The shoe cleaning, the kick, the threat, the false accusation, the forced signature. I pulled out my phone. My hands were steady now. I typed a message to Goldberg. "I have it. I have the extortion. I have the assault. I have the threat of false imprisonment. I have them on tape admitting they want to frame Tyrell." I hit send. I started the engine. The heater roared to life, blowing warm air onto my frozen hands. I looked at the mansion looming in the rearview mirror, lit up like a castle. "Enjoy your victory, Victoria," I whispered. "It is going to be the most expensive piece of paper you ever held." I put the truck in gear and drove away, leaving the lamb behind and letting the wolf come out to play. The hunt was on. I returned to the bunker beneath my shack where the air was cool, and the hum of the servers provided a steady rhythm to my thoughts. Tyrell was still there, sitting in the leather chair, watching the monitors. He looked exhausted, but his eyes were alert. He was watching the financial dissection of a man he once feared. On the main screen, a digital countdown clock was running. It was tracking the debt maturity of Kensington Logistics. Richard Kensington was a man drowning in shallow water. Goldberg had done a deep dive into his books, and what we found was pathetic. Richard had tried to modernize his fortune by gambling on volatile cryptocurrency markets. He had leveraged his company assets to buy millions of dollars worth of a coin that had crashed 48 hours ago. He was not just broke. He was underwater. He had 48 hours to come up with $5 million to cover a margin call from his primary lender, or his entire logistics fleet would be seized. I watched him on the surveillance feed from his office. We had tapped into his internal security system an hour ago. It was surprisingly easy. He had spent thousands on mahogany desks and gold-plated fixtures, but had installed a budget firewall. Richard was pacing his office. He looked nothing like the arrogant tyrant who had made me clean his wife's shoes. His tie was loosened. His hair was disheveled. He was sweating through his silk shirt. He was making call after call. I could hear his voice through the speakers. It was high-pitched and desperate. "Come on, George," he shouted into the phone. "We go way back. I just need a bridge loan. $5 million. I will pay you back next month. No, do not hang up on me. George." He slammed the phone down. He poured himself another drink. His hands were shaking so badly the crystal decanter rattled against the glass. He was watching his legacy evaporate. He knew that if he lost the company, he lost everything. His social standing, his country club membership, his identity. I looked at Goldberg. "Is Smith ready?" Goldberg nodded. "He is in the lobby of Richard's building right now." Smith was my creation. He was a tall white man with a jawline that could cut glass and a suit that cost $5,000. He was an actor I had hired years ago to front negotiations when my race was an issue for potential sellers. To the world, he was Arthur Smith, the managing partner of Phoenix Ventures, a high-risk, high-reward private equity firm. In reality, he was on my payroll. He moved when I said move. He spoke when I said speak. "Send him up," I said. I watched on the screen as Smith walked into Richard's office. He did not knock. He walked in with the confidence of a man who owned the building. Richard looked up startled. He tried to compose himself. He buttoned his jacket and ran a hand through his hair, trying to summon the ghost of his dignity. "Who are you?" Richard demanded. "I did not have an appointment." Smith smiled. It was a predatory smile. It was perfect. "Mr. Kensington, my name is Arthur Smith. I represent a private capital group that specializes in distressed assets. We heard you were having a liquidity issue." Richard bristled. "I do not have liquidity issues." "Who told you that?" Smith sat down in the chair opposite Richard without being invited. He crossed his legs. "The market talks, Richard. We know about the margin call. We know about the crypto losses. We know you have until Friday morning to pay the bank or they chain the gates of your warehouse." Richard slumped in his chair. The fight went out of him. He looked old. "What do you want?" he whispered. "We want to help," Smith said smoothly. "My partners admire your legacy. They hate to see a historic firm like Kensington Logistics fail because of a momentary lapse in judgment. We are prepared to offer you a capital injection, $5 million, available immediately." Richard's head snapped up. Hope is a dangerous drug, and he just took a massive hit. $5 million, he asked. "What are the terms?" "Standard high-risk terms," Smith said, shrugging. "We pay off the bank. We provide operating capital. In exchange, we take a senior secured position on the company." Richard frowned. He was desperate, but he was not stupid. "Not entirely. That means you would own the debt." "It means we are partners," Smith corrected. "We want you to succeed. In fact, we want you to succeed so publicly that it restores confidence in the brand immediately." Smith leaned forward, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "We heard about the unfortunate events at your daughter's wedding. Rumors are flying, Richard. People are saying the Kensington name is losing its luster. My partners think you need a win. We think you need to show the world that you are still on top." Richard's eyes narrowed. The mention of the wedding stung his pride. "It was a disaster," he muttered. "That trashy family ruined everything." "Exactly," Smith said. "You need to overwrite that narrative. You need to launch your new project, the Kensington Tower, with a gala that makes the wedding look like a backyard barbecue. You need to show them you are untouchable. Use our money to pay the debt, yes, but use the rest to throw the biggest party New York has ever seen. Rebrand. Rebirth." I watched Richard's face. I saw the vanity take over. I saw the ego swallow the caution. He did not see a loan shark. He saw a mirror reflecting the man he wanted to be. A gala, Richard said softly. Yes, a launch party. I can invite everyone, the mayor, the press. I can show them all. I looked at Tyrell in the bunker. See that sun, I said. That is his weakness. He would rather look rich than be rich. He is willing to sell his soul for an audience. Smith reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick document. It was bound in blue leather. This is the agreement, Smith said. $5 million. Interest-only payments for the first year. It gives you breathing room. Richard reached for the document. However, Smith said, placing his hand on the cover, there is a requirement for collateral. Since the company assets are already heavily leveraged, my partners require a personal guarantee. Richard hesitated. Personal guarantee. Everything Smith said, your house, your cars, your art collection, your future inheritance. Everything you own personally must be pledged to secure the loan. It is just a formality, of course. As long as you make the payments, your assets are safe. Richard looked around his office. He looked at the pictures of his ancestors on the wall. He looked at the view of the city he thought he owned. He was terrified of losing it all today. The contract offered him a chance to keep it for at least another year. He convinced himself he could turn it around. He convinced himself he was smarter than the market. I will sign, he said. Smith opened the document to the signature page. He did not encourage Richard to read the rest. He did not point out page 42, paragraph 7. That was the clause Goldberg and I had drafted specifically for this moment. It was the morality clause. It stated that the lender had the right to call in the entire loan immediately and seize all collateral if the borrower engaged in conduct detrimental to the reputation of the business or violated standard community ethics. It was a broad, sweeping trap, and Richard was about to walk right into it. Richard picked up his gold fountain pen. He did not read the contract. He did not call his lawyer. He was too ashamed to let his lawyer know how deep in the hole he was. He just wanted the money. He wanted the relief. He wanted the party. He signed his name with a flourish. Richard Kensington. Smith signed below him. He pulled a check from his jacket pocket. It was a cashier's check for $5 million. He slid it across the desk. Congratulations, Richard, Smith said. You are back in the game. Richard stared at the check. He looked like he wanted to kiss it. Thank you, he said, his voice thick with emotion. You have no idea what this means. Smith stood up and buttoned his jacket. Oh, I think I do, Smith said. We will be watching your success closely. Good day, Mr. Kensington. Smith walked out. Richard immediately picked up his phone. He did not call the bank to pay his debt. He called his event planner. Get me the plaza, he barked into the phone. No bigger. Get me the Metropolitan Hall. I want a gala in 3 days. The theme is gold. Everything gold. I want the best champagne. I want the press. Richard Kensington is back. I turned off the audio feed. I leaned back in my chair. He signed his death warrant, I told Tyrell. Tyrell looked at the screen where Richard was celebrating. He did not even read it, Tyrell said in disbelief. He bet his house, his life on a stranger just so he could throw a party. He thinks the money is free, I said. He thinks he bought time, but he just sold his future. I turned to Goldberg. Register the lien on his property immediately. I want the paperwork filed before he finishes his drink, and flag the morality clause in the system. The moment he steps out of line, I want the notification. He will step out of line, Goldberg said dryly. A man like that cannot help himself. He will humiliate someone. He will cheat someone. It is in his nature. I stood up and walked over to the map of the city. I placed a red pin on the location of the Kensington estate. He invited us to a wedding to mock us, I said. Now he is going to invite us to a launch party, and this time we are going to be the entertainment. I looked at Tyrell. Go get some sleep, son. You have a big few days ahead of you. You need to get fitted for a suit. A suit, Tyrell asked. Yes, I said. An Italian suit. The most expensive one you can find. When we walk into that gala, I want you to look like a king, because by the time the night is over, you are going to own the castle. Tyrell nodded. He was beginning to understand. He was beginning to see that the game was not about money. It was about leverage. And we had just secured the ultimate lever. I stayed in the bunker alone for a while watching Richard. He was laughing on the phone. He was drunk on relief. He had no idea that the check he was holding was not a lifeline. It was the rope he would use to hang himself. And I was the one who had tied the knot. The glow of the monitor cast a sick, pale light over Tyrell's face as we watched his life being dismantled in real time. Victoria had gone live on TikTok 10 minutes ago. She sat on the edge of her 4-poster bed in the Kensington mansion wearing a simple white t-shirt that looked too big for her. It was a calculated wardrobe choice designed to make her look small and vulnerable. But it was her face that drew the eyes of 5 million people. Her left cheek was a canvas of purple and yellow bruises. Her lip was split. To the untrained eye, she looked like she had gone a few rounds with a heavyweight boxer. To me, she looked like a masterclass in theatrical makeup. I knew for a fact Tyrell had never touched her. I knew the security guards had dragged him out without her laying a finger on him except for the slap she delivered. But the internet does not care about facts. It cares about tears. I tried to love him. Victoria sobbed into the camera, wiping her eyes with a trembling hand. I tried so hard to look past his background. I thought he was a good man who just had a hard life. I paid for everything. I bought him clothes. I let him drive my car. I just wanted to lift him up. She paused to let the viewer count climb. The numbers ticked up frantically. 3 million, 4 million. But he was a monster, she whispered. He was jealous of my family. He was jealous of our success. He would get so angry when he drank. He would grab me. He would scream that I thought I was better than him. Last night at the rehearsal dinner, he cornered me in the bathroom. He told me if I did not marry him, he would kill me. Tyrell sat in the bunker, his hands gripping the arms of his chair so hard the leather creaked. He was not breathing. He was watching the woman he loved turn him into a pariah. I was so scared, she continued. That is why I let my father handle it. That is why I stayed quiet. But when he tried to attack my mother on stage, I knew I had to speak up. I have to warn other women. Do not let these men fool you. They look at us and see a payday. They see a victim. Please, if you see Tyrell Hammond, call the police. He is dangerous. He is unstable. The comment stream on the side of the video was a blur of hatred. Find him. Hurt him. He deserves to die. Protect this queen. I hope he rots. Tyrell finally looked away. He looked at me, his eyes hollow. Dad, they believe her. Everyone believes her. Look at the comments. They want to kill me. It is a performance, Tyrell, I said, my voice steady. It is a script. She's playing the role of the damsel because she knows her father needs public sympathy to sell his new image. It is not real. It feels real, he whispered. My phone is blowing up. People from college, people from my old job, they are sending me death threats. They are saying they know where I live. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from upstairs. It sounded like an explosion. I jumped up and ran to the stairs with Tyrell close behind. We rushed up to the main floor of the shack. The front window in the living room was shattered. Glass covered the floor. Lying in the middle of the rug was a brick wrapped in a piece of paper. I walked over and picked it up. I unfolded the paper. Scrawled in thick black marker were the words, "Leave town or die, animal." Tyrell stared at the broken window. The cold wind blew in, carrying the sound of a car screeching away in the distance. They found us, he said. His voice was rising in panic. How did they find us? The internet finds everyone, I said. I warned you. I walked to the closet and grabbed a piece of plywood I kept for storms. I began to nail it over the window. We are not safe here, Tyrell said, pacing the small room. We need to go. We need to leave the state. We are staying right here, I said, hammering a nail with a single blow. This is our home. We do not run from bullies. I need to get out, Tyrell said. I need air. I need cigarettes. He did not smoke. He had not smoked in years. But fear makes you reach for old crutches. Before I could stop him, he unlocked the front door and bolted out into the night. Tyrell, wait, I shouted, dropping the hammer. I ran after him, but he was already in the truck. He peeled out of the driveway, gravel spraying behind him. He was heading for the convenience store down the road, the only place open at this hour. I ran to my own car, a nondescript sedan I kept under a tarp. I started it and chased after him. I knew what was waiting for him out there. The mob does not sleep. I pulled into the parking lot of the Quick Stop 5 minutes later. Tyrell's truck was parked haphazardly near the pumps. I saw a group of 4 men standing near the entrance. They were wearing hoodies and looking at something on a phone. Then they looked at the truck. I saw Tyrell walk out of the store. He had a pack of cigarettes in his hand. He looked small. He looked defeated. One of the men pointed at him. "That is him," he shouted. "That is the guy from the video." They rushed him. It happened so fast. One of them punched Tyrell in the back of the head. He went down hard, hitting the pavement face first. They started kicking him. They were screaming obscenities, calling him every name in the book. They were not fighting him. They were punishing him. I did not think. I did not plan. I just drove. I slammed my foot on the accelerator and drove the sedan right up onto the curb, screeching to a halt inches from the group. I threw the door open and stepped out, holding a tire iron I kept under the seat. "Get away from him," I roared. The sight of a crazy old man wielding a steel bar made them pause. They looked at me, then at the car, then at Tyrell bleeding on the ground. "He beats women," one of them spat. "He deserves it." "He did not touch anyone," I yelled, swinging the iron. "Now back off before I break your knees." Sirens wailed in the distance. Someone must have called the cops. The group scattered, running into the woods behind the store. Cowards always run when the odds even out. I dropped the iron and knelt beside my son. He was curled into a ball, protecting his head. His face was scraped and bleeding. His lip was busted. He was shaking violently. "Tyrell," I said softly, "it is okay. They are gone." He looked up at me. His eyes were swollen. There was no fight left in him, just a deep, dark pit of despair. "Let me die, Dad," he whispered through his split lip. "Just let them kill me. It is better than this. I cannot do it. I cannot fight the whole world. I am tired. I just want it to stop." I pulled him up. He was heavy, dead weight. I dragged him to the sedan and shoved him into the passenger seat. I drove us back to the shack in silence. I took him downstairs to the bunker. I cleaned his wounds with the first aid kit we kept for emergencies. I stitched the cut on his eyebrow myself. My hands were steady. His were not. He sat there staring at the floor. "I am going to kill myself," he said. It was not a threat. It was a statement of fact. I have nothing left. No job, no reputation, no wife. And now I am a danger to you. If I am dead, they will leave you alone. I grabbed his face with both hands, forcing him to look at me. "You are not going to die," I said, my voice hard as flint. "You are going to live. You are going to live to see them beg. You think this is the end. This is just the second act. They threw a punch. Fine. Now we know they can hit, but they do not know we have a knife." The computer on the desk chirped. A secure file transfer had just completed. It was from the private investigator we had hired to look into Victoria. I walked over to the computer and opened the file. I scanned the first page, then the second. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. "Tyrell," I said. "Come here." He did not move. "Come here," I commanded. He dragged himself out of the chair and walked over to the desk. He looked at the screen with one eye swollen shut. "What is it?" he mumbled. "It is her resume," I said. "Her real resume." The document was a dossier from the Florida State Police. It featured a mugshot of a woman who looked exactly like Victoria, but with blonde hair and bad makeup. The name under the photo was not Victoria Kensington, it was Vicky Velez, alias Vicky the Vamp, I read aloud. Wanted for 3 counts of insurance fraud in Miami, 2 counts of bigamy in Texas. She marries immigrants with criminal records to get them green cards, then blackmails them for cash. She has open warrants in 3 states. I scrolled down. There were photos of her previous weddings. In one she was marrying a Russian mobster, in another a cartel enforcer. She was a professional predator. A chameleon. Tyrell stared at the screen. The fog of depression began to lift, replaced by a sharp, burning shock. "She is a criminal," he whispered. "She is not a Kensington." "Oh, she is a Kensington now," I said. "Richard probably legally adopted her or forged her papers to cover her tracks. He needed a pretty face to lure you in, and she needed a new identity to hide from the law. They are perfect for each other. 2 parasites feeding off the same host." I looked at Tyrell. "She went on the internet and told 5 million people you were a monster. She used her fake name and her fake tears to destroy you. But she forgot one thing. When you live a lie, you always leave a trail." I printed the file. The pages were warm in my hand. "This is not just dirt, son. This is a nuclear bomb. She's a fugitive. If the police find out where she is, she goes to federal prison for 10 years minimum." Tyrell touched his swollen lip. He looked at the mugshot of the woman who had slapped him, the woman who had ruined him. "She beat me up," he said. "She lied about me." "Yes," I said, and now we own her. I handed him the file. Keep this. Memorize it. When we walk into that gala on Saturday, you are not going to be the victim. You are going to be the prosecutor. You are going to look her in the eye, and you are going to watch her soul leave her body. Tyrell took the file. His hands stopped shaking. He looked at the photo of Vicky the vamp. He looked at the list of her crimes. He took a deep breath. "Okay, Dad," he said. "Let us go hunting." I nodded. The brick through the window, the beating at the store, the live stream, it was all noise, it was all distraction. We had the signal, we had the truth, and the truth is the only weapon that never runs out of ammo. I poured us another drink. To Vicky, I said, raising my glass, "Our almost daughter-in-law, she really is talented. It is a shame she picked the wrong family to scam." We drank. Outside, the wind howled through the broken window. Inside the bunker, we prepared for war. The morning after the attack, I woke Tyrell up before the sun had even thought about rising. His face was a map of purple and blue bruises, and his lip was swollen to the size of a sausage, but he did not complain. He drank his black coffee in silence. He was learning that pain is just another data point. It is information telling you that you are still alive and that you have work to do. "Get dressed," I said. "We are going to work." We drove the truck out to the industrial district. We passed rows of silent warehouses and rusted chain-link fences until we reached a massive concrete structure with no windows. The sign out front read Hammond Recycling Facility 4. To the average passerby, it looked like a dump. To me, it looked like a bank vault. I swiped my key card and we walked onto the floor. The noise was deafening. Giant shredders were chewing through tons of discarded electronics. Computers, phones, televisions, servers. It was the graveyard of technology. I handed Tyrell a pair of safety goggles and led him to the chemical separation line. We watched as a stream of crushed circuit boards was bathed in a solution. The plastic melted away. The copper separated. And then, at the end of the line, a small, steady stream of liquid gold dripped into a mold. Tyrell watched, mesmerized. He saw the dirty, broken trash going in one end and pure 24-karat gold coming out the other. "People throw this away," I shouted over the roar of the machines. "They buy the newest phone and toss the old one. They think it is garbage. They do not know they are throwing away the building blocks of wealth." I picked up a cooled bar of recycled gold from the output tray. It was heavy. It was warm. I handed it to Tyrell. "We recover $3 million worth of gold, silver, and platinum from this facility every month," I said. We walked up to the catwalk overlooking the operation. I swept my hand across the vista of grinding metal and chemical steam. "Trash has value if you put it in the right place," I said, looking Tyrell in the eye. "You have to look past the dirt. You have to look past the smell. You have to see the essence." I took the gold bar back from him and set it on the railing. "Now think about the Kensington family. They look shiny. They have the clothes, the cars, the mansion. They look like gold. But cut them open and what do you find? You find lead. You find debt. You find toxic waste. They are fake gold, Tyrell. They shine, but they have no weight." Tyrell looked down at the factory floor and then back at me. The fear that had clouded his eyes for days was gone. It was replaced by a cold calculation. "I see it," he said. "They are hollow." "Exactly," I replied. "And because they are hollow, they are fragile. You have to learn to look through the shell." Victoria is not a beautiful woman. She is a criminal with a history of fraud. Richard is not a tycoon. He is a gambling addict with a mortgage he cannot pay. Once you see them for what they are, you stop being afraid of them. You start pitying them, and then you start owning them. We left the plant feeling stronger. The smell of ozone and money clung to our clothes. We drove back to the shack, ready for the next move. But the enemy has a way of moving when you least expect it. We had just walked into the kitchen when the landline on the wall rang. Only 3 people had that number. Goldberg, my foreman, and Richard Kensington. I picked up the receiver. Lester speaking. "Lester, you old dog." It was Richard. His voice was slurred. He was drunk. It was 10 in the morning, but he was celebrating. He had $5 million of my money in his account, and he felt like God. "Mr. Kensington," I said, making my voice tremble just enough. "To what do I owe the pleasure? I am feeling generous." "Lester," Richard laughed. It was a wet, ugly sound. "I am expanding my empire. The Kensington Tower project is going to be huge, the biggest thing this city has ever seen. And I need space. I need parking. Lots of parking for all the VIPs who will be coming to kiss my ring." He paused to take a drink. I could hear the ice clinking in his glass. I was looking at the survey maps. Richard continued. "And I realized something funny. Your little shack, that pathetic pile of wood you call a home, sits right on the edge of my property line. It is an eyesore, Lester. It ruins the view from my future office." I tightened my grip on the phone. I knew where this was going. "I want to buy it," he said. "I want to bulldoze it and pave it over. I will put the dumpster area right where your bedroom is." Poetic, do not you think? I looked at Tyrell. He was watching me intently. I put the phone on speaker so he could hear. "Mr. Kensington, this is my home," I said. "It is all I have. Everything has a price," Richard said. "And I am offering you a fair one. $5,000. $5,000. The land alone was worth $500,000 in this market. The insults just kept coming. $5,000, I stammered. "Sir, I cannot buy a tent for $5,000. I have nowhere to go. Not my problem." Richard snapped, his mood shifting instantly from jovial to threatening. "Take the $5,000, Lester. Take it and buy a bus ticket to somewhere far away. Because if you do not, I will make your life hell." He lowered his voice. "I have friends at City Hall, Lester. I have lunch with the zoning commissioner. All I have to do is make one phone call and your house gets condemned. They will find code violations you never heard of. They will declare it unsafe. They will evict you and you will get nothing. Zero. So be a smart garbage man. Take the cash." He was bluffing about his influence. I owned the debt on the zoning commissioner's vacation home. But Richard did not know that. He thought he was the king of the world because he had a checkbook again. "Please, sir," I begged. "Give me time to think." "You have 1 hour," he shouted. "I am sending a courier with the contract. Sign it, or I call the bulldozers." He hung up. The dial tone hummed in the quiet kitchen. Tyrell looked at me. He was furious. $5,000, he spat. "He wants to pave over our home. Dad, tell me we are not going to do this." I smiled. It was the smile of a hunter who just heard the trap snap shut. "We are going to do exactly what he wants," I said. I called Goldberg. "Richard wants the land," I said. "He is sending a contract. $5,000, let him have it," Goldberg said, instantly understanding the play. But I added, "I need you to draft an addendum, a rider to the contract. Richard is drunk and arrogant. He will not read the fine print. He just wants the deed." "What is the clause?" Goldberg asked. "The reversionary interest clause," I said. "Standard boilerplate for high-risk transfers. If the buyer declares bankruptcy, faces criminal charges, or fails to develop the land within 6 months, the title reverts to the original owner." "And the improvements?" Goldberg asked. "Everything," I said. "If the title reverts, the owner keeps the land and any structures or improvements made to it at no cost." "It is done," Goldberg said. "I will have the digital file inserted into the packet his courier is carrying. We have a man inside his legal team. It will be in the stack." The courier arrived 45 minutes later. He was a young kid who looked bored. He handed me a thick envelope. "Sign at the tabs," he said, chewing gum. I took the papers to the kitchen table. Tyrell stood behind me. The contract was standard predatory garbage. It transferred the deed of my land to Kensington Logistics for the sum of $5,000. I flipped to page 15. There it was. Clause 14B, the reversionary interest clause. It was buried in a wall of text about easements and utility access. Richard would never see it. He was too busy planning his party. I signed the papers with my shaky left-handed scrawl. I handed them back to the courier. "Here," I said, "tell Mr. Kensington I am sorry." The courier shrugged and left. I watched him drive away. "He got it," Tyrell said. "He got our house." "He thinks he got our house," I corrected. "He just rented it for a few days. And the rent is going to cost him his entire company." I walked over to the fridge and pulled out a beer. "He is going to pave this lot," I said. "He is going to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars clearing the trees, pouring concrete, installing lights. He is going to build a beautiful parking lot for his new tower." I took a sip of the beer. "And when we foreclose on him next week, when the police arrest him and his fake daughter, that parking lot becomes ours. He is paying for our renovation, Tyrell. He is increasing our property value with money he borrowed from us." Tyrell started to laugh. It was a dry disbelief at first, but then it grew. He laughed until he was holding his sides. "You are dangerous, Dad," he said. I looked out the window at the trees that would soon be gone. "I am just a businessman's son. Richard wanted to buy me out. I just made sure the price was right. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from the bank. The $5,000 had been deposited. I looked at the notification and then at Tyrell. "Get your coat." "Where are we going?" he asked. "To buy your suit," I said. "We have $5,000 of Richard's money to spend. It would be rude not to wear it to his party." We walked out of the shack, leaving the ghost of our poverty behind. Richard Kensington thought he had won another victory. He thought he had crushed the insect living on his border. He did not know that the insect was actually a parasite, and it had just burrowed into his brain. The countdown to the gala had begun. And we were going to be dressed to kill. 2 days before the gala, a black town car pulled up to the curb in front of my shack. A courier in a uniform that cost more than my weekly grocery bill stepped out. He did not knock. He honked the horn. He waited for me to come out to him. I walked slowly down the porch steps, wiping my hands on a rag. The courier handed me a thick, cream-colored envelope. It was heavy. It was embossed with gold leaf. It was an invitation to the launch of the Kensington Tower. I opened it right there in the driveway. Inside were 2 VIP passes. They were laminated and hung on silk lanyards, but there was a note clipped to them. It was handwritten in Richard's sprawling, arrogant script. "Lester, bring the boy. I want you to see what real power looks like. Also, I fired my cleaning crew for the night. Since you are looking for work, I figured you could make yourself useful. Consider this your orientation. Wear comfortable shoes. You will be on your feet all night." I looked closer at the VIP passes. Underneath my name, where it should have said guest, it said event sanitation staff. Underneath Tyrell's name, it said assistant sanitation staff. He was not inviting us to celebrate. He was inviting us to be the help. He wanted to parade us in front of the city's elite. He wanted to show his investors that he had crushed his enemies so thoroughly that they were now scrubbing his floors. It was a power move designed to strip away the last shred of our dignity. I walked back inside and threw the invitation on the table. Tyrell picked it up. He read the note. His face darkened. The veins in his neck stood out. "I am not going," he said, throwing the pass across the room. "I am not going to let him humiliate us again. He wants us to clean his toilets, Dad. He wants to laugh at us." I picked up the pass and hung it around my neck. "We are going," I said, "and we are going to do exactly what he wants." Tyrell looked at me like I had lost my mind. "Why? Why would you give him that satisfaction?" "Because arrogance is blinding," I replied. "He thinks we are coming to kneel. He thinks we are defeated. When your enemy opens the door for you, you walk through it. Even if he thinks he is letting in the maid, he is actually letting in the executioner." Tyrell shook his head, pacing the small kitchen. "I cannot do it, Dad. I cannot watch Victoria laugh at me again. I cannot watch them look at you like you are dirt." "You will not have to watch for long," I said. "This is the end game, son. Richard has gathered everyone he knows in one room. The press, the investors, the police commissioner. He has built the perfect stage for his own destruction. If we stay home, we miss the show." I opened the refrigerator and took out the $5,000 in cash Richard had paid for my land. I tossed the stack of bills to Tyrell. "Take this. Go to the city. Go to the tailor on 5th Avenue, the one who only takes appointments. Tell him Lester sent you." Tyrell looked at the money. "What is this for?" "It is for your armor," I said. "You are going to buy a suit. Not just any suit. I want Italian wool. I want a cut that makes you look like you own the building. I want you to look like a King Tyrell." He looked at the money and then at me. "What about you? Are you getting a suit?" "No," I said. "I am wearing my work clothes. I am wearing the old gray suit I wore to the wedding, the one with the frayed cuffs." "Why?" "Because I need them to see the contrast I explained. I need Richard to look at me and see a weak, broken old man. I need him to feel safe. If I walk in there looking like a billionaire, he will put his guard up. But if I walk in there looking like a janitor, he will hand me the microphone. And you, my son, you need to look like the future. You are the heir to Hammond Holdings. You need to look ready to take the throne." Tyrell gripped the cash. He took a deep breath. The fire was back in his eyes. "Okay, Dad. I will get the suit." "Good," I said. "Get a haircut too. Shave. Look sharp. Tomorrow night we dine in hell." The night of the gala arrived. The Metropolitan Hall was lit up like a supernova. Searchlights swept the sky. Red carpets were rolled out. Limousines were lined up around the block, dropping off senators, celebrities, and tycoons. We parked my truck 3 blocks away in a dark alley. We walked to the entrance. Tyrell looked magnificent. The suit was midnight blue, tailored to perfection. He wore a crisp white shirt and a silk tie. He looked powerful. He looked dangerous. He walked with his head high. I walked beside him in my old gray suit. It was wrinkled. My shoes were scuffed. I walked with a stoop, making myself look smaller, older, more tired. We reached the red carpet. The paparazzi were snapping photos of a famous actress. When they saw us, the cameras lowered. They looked confused. They saw Tyrell and thought he was a star they did not recognize. Then they saw me and assumed I was his charity case. The security guard at the door was a mountain of a man. He looked at our invitations. He sneered when he saw the sanitation staff designation. Service entrance is around the back, he grunted, pointing a thumb toward the alley. Tyrell stepped forward. He did not raise his voice, but he projected authority. "We are guests of Mr. Kensington. We will enter through the front." The guard hesitated. The suit was working. It commanded respect. "Mr. Kensington said the staff goes through the back," the guard insisted, but his voice wavered. Tyrell leaned in close. "Do you want to be the one to tell Mr. Kensington that his guests are waiting on the sidewalk because you cannot read a VIP pass?" The guard looked at the pass again. It did say VIP in big gold letters, even if the fine print said sanitation. He swallowed. He unhooked the velvet rope. "Go ahead," he muttered. We walked into the hall. It was a cavern of gold and crystal. Waiters circulated with trays of caviar. A string quartet played on a balcony. In the center of the room was a massive ice sculpture of the proposed Kensington Tower. It was melting slightly dripping water onto the floor. The room went quiet as we entered. It started as a ripple and spread like a wave. People turned to stare. They whispered behind their hands. "Isn't that the groom?" someone hissed. "The one who ran away?" "And the father. Look at him. He looks like a beggar. Why are they here?" Richard Kensington was standing on a raised platform at the far end of the room holding a glass of champagne. He was surrounded by sycophants. He looked up and saw us. A slow, cruel smile spread across his face. He tapped his glass with a spoon. The sharp sound cut through the murmurs. "Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please?" The room fell silent. 500 faces turned toward the stage. Richard gestured toward us with his glass. "I am so glad you could all make it tonight. We have some very special guests with us. You all remember the unfortunate incident last week. Well, I believe in second chances. I believe in forgiveness. And I believe in putting people to work." He laughed. The crowd chuckled nervously. "Lester Tyrell, come up here. Do not be shy." Tyrell looked at me. I nodded. We walked through the crowd. People parted for us, pulling their expensive clothes away from me as if I were contagious. We climbed the stairs to the stage. The lights were blinding. Richard put an arm around my shoulder. He smelled of expensive cologne and triumph. "Everyone, this is Lester. Lester is a man of humble talents. He has had a hard week. He sold his house to me yesterday, did you know that? For $5,000. The crowd gasped. $5,000 for land in this city was theft. But they did not see it that way. They saw it as my failure. "Yes." Richard continued, squeezing my shoulder hard. "Lester is starting over, and I wanted to help him. I wanted to give him a chance to show us what he is really good at." Richard snapped his fingers. A waiter ran onto the stage carrying a bucket and a mop. It was a dirty industrial mop with gray strings. Richard took the mop. He held it out to me. "Here you go, Lester. The floor is a bit sticky. Why do not you show these fine people how a professional handles a mess?" Victoria was standing just off to the side. She was holding her phone up, live streaming to her millions of followers. She was grinning. "Do it, Lester," she called out. "Earn your dinner." The crowd was silent now. This was not funny anymore. It was cruel. It was raw bullying. But no one stepped in. No one said a word. They were all afraid of Richard, or they were enjoying the spectacle too much to stop it. I looked at the mop. I looked at Richard. His eyes were shining with malice. He was loving this. He felt like a god. He thought he had broken me completely. I reached out and took the mop handle. It was rough wood. "That is it," Richard said, patting my back. "That is a good boy. Now there is a spot right there." He deliberately tipped his champagne glass, pouring the golden liquid onto the stage floor between my feet. "Oops," Richard said. "Clumsy me. Clean it up, Lester." Victoria zoomed in on the puddle and then on my face. "Clean it," she whispered. I stood there holding the mop. I felt the weight of it. I felt the heat of the lights. I looked at Tyrell. He was vibrating with rage, ready to snap. I gave him a small, almost imperceptible signal to wait. I looked out at the audience. I saw the bankers who had denied me loans 40 years ago. I saw the real estate developers who had tried to rezone my landfills. I saw the faces of the people who ran this city. I looked at Richard. "You want me to clean this?" I asked, my voice amplified by the microphone he was still holding near me. "Yes," Richard said. "I want you to do what you were born to do." I gripped the mop tighter. "I was born to take out the trash, Richard," I said. And then I moved. I did not mop the floor. I swung the handle. I did not look at the puddle of champagne on the floor. I looked at the tower of crystal glasses standing next to it. It was a monument to excess rising. 6 feet in the air, filled with vintage sparkling wine that cost more than my first house. I tightened my grip on the rough wood of the mop handle. I felt the calluses on my palms, the map of 40 years of hard labor. Richard was smiling, expecting me to bow, expecting me to scrub. I did not bow. I swung. The mop handle cut through the air with a whistle. It connected with the base of the champagne tower with the force of a sledgehammer. The sound was not just a crash, it was an explosion of glass and liquid that sounded like a building collapsing. Shards of crystal flew like shrapnel. Glittering wine sprayed across the stage, soaking the front row of the audience. The tower disintegrated in a chaotic cascade of destruction. The noise echoed off the high ceilings of the Metropolitan Hall, silencing every whisper, every laugh, every breath. Richard jumped back, his expensive shoes splashing in the wine. He looked at the shattered remains of his centerpiece, and then at me. His face was a mask of pure shock. He could not process what had just happened. The janitor had not cleaned. The janitor had destroyed. "Are you insane?" he screamed, his voice cracking. "You just destroyed $50,000 worth of crystal. Security, get him off this stage. Arrest him." I did not move. I stood amidst the wreckage, holding the mop like a staff of office. I looked him dead in the eye. "I did not come here to clean up your trash, Richard," I said, my voice booming through the speakers. "I came here to collect it." Before the security guards could take a single step toward the stage, the lights in the Metropolitan Hall died. The entire room was plunged into absolute darkness. The crowd gasped. Panicked murmurs rippled through the blackness. Then a low hum filled the air. The massive LED screen behind the stage, which had been displaying the rendering of the Kensington Tower, flickered to life. It did not show the tower anymore. It showed a logo, a simple, stark logo in industrial orange and black. Hammond Holdings. Beneath it was the slogan, "We process the future." A spotlight cut through the darkness. It did not land on Richard. It landed on the double doors at the back of the room. The doors swung open. Goldberg walked in. He was not alone. Flanking him were 4 uniformed officers from the Economic Crimes Unit and 2 men in dark suits carrying leather briefcases. Goldberg walked down the center aisle. The crowd parted for him instinctively. He walked with the heavy, inevitable pace of a man who knows he has already won. He climbed the stairs to the stage, stepping over the broken glass without looking down. He stood next to me. He placed a briefcase on the podium right next to Richard. "Who are you?" Richard demanded, trying to regain control of his event. "Get off my stage. This is a private party." Goldberg ignored him. He leaned into the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the interruption. My name is Saul Goldberg. I am the Chief Legal Counsel for Hammond Holdings. We are here to execute a seizure order." Richard laughed nervously, looking out at the crowd. It was a desperate sound. "This is a joke, right? Is this part of the show? Very funny, Lester. You hired an actor?" Goldberg opened the briefcase. He pulled out a thick stack of documents stamped with the seal of the Supreme Court. He held them up for the cameras. "This is not a show. Mr. Kensington. At 9 a.m. this morning, Kensington Logistics failed to meet the solvency requirements stipulated in your loan agreement. Furthermore, you violated the morality clause of your contract by engaging in public acts of humiliation and fraud." Richard turned pale. "What loan agreement? I borrowed money from Phoenix Ventures." Goldberg nodded. "Phoenix Ventures is a wholly owned subsidiary of Hammond Holdings. We bought your debt, Mr. Kensington. All of it. The $50 million in secured loans, the mortgage on your warehouse, the liens on your fleet, and most importantly, the personal guarantee on your estate. You pledged everything you own to secure that money. And 5 minutes ago, when you handed a mop to a guest and attempted to humiliate him, you triggered the immediate repayment clause. You are in default." The room was so quiet you could hear the ice melting in the sculpture. Goldberg continued, his voice cutting like a razor per the terms of the agreement. Hammond Holdings is exercising its right to immediate foreclosure. We are seizing all assets of Kensington Logistics effective immediately. This building, the land, the trucks, and your personal residence are now the property of the Hammond estate. We have a court order freezing your bank accounts. We have a court order impounding your vehicles, and we have a court order for your immediate eviction from the premises. Richard staggered back. He looked at the documents. He looked at the police officers. He looked at the screen with the orange logo. He was shaking his head violently. "This is impossible," he stammered. "I do not know any Hammond." "Who is Hammond?" "I never did business with anyone named Hammond." "This is a mistake. I am Richard Kensington. I know the mayor. I know the governor. You cannot do this to me." Goldberg closed the briefcase. He looked at Richard with cold indifference. "You did business with us every day, Mr. Kensington. You just never looked at the person signing the checks. You were too busy looking in the mirror." Richard turned to the crowd, looking for support, looking for anyone to save him, but the crowd was recoiling. They smelled the blood in the water. They knew that when the Economic Crimes Unit shows up, the party is over. Richard grabbed the microphone, his hands trembling violently. "Hammond," he screamed, his voice breaking. "Who is Hammond? Show yourself, you coward. I do not know any black trash named Hammond." I stepped forward. I took the mop handle and leaned it against the podium. I adjusted my tie. I smoothed the lapels of my old gray suit. I looked at my son Tyrell. He was standing tall, his blue suit gleaming under the spotlight. He nodded at me. I walked to the microphone. Richard was breathing hard, his eyes wild. I reached out and took the mic from his hand. He did not fight me. He was too confused. I cleared my throat. The sound rolled over the 500 guests like thunder. "I am Hammond," I said. Richard stared at me. He blinked. He looked at my face, then at my hands, then at my suit. He laughed. It was a high-pitched, hysterical sound. "You," he wheezed, "the garbage man. You are Lester. You are a nobody. You live in a shack. I bought your house for $5,000 yesterday. You are broke." I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. I pulled out the check for $5,000 he had sent me. I held it up. I ripped it in half, slowly, letting the pieces fall into the puddle of champagne. "I am Lester Hammond." I said, my voice steady and hard. "I am the founder and CEO of Hammond Holdings. I started picking up trash 40 years ago while you were still spending your daddy's money. I built the recycling plants that process your waste. I own the land your warehouses sit on. I own the debt that keeps your lights on. And as of tonight, I own you." The crowd erupted. It was not applause. It was a collective gasp of disbelief. Phones were raised. Cameras flashed, recording the moment the world turned upside down. Richard looked at me with horror, dawning in his eyes. He realized it was true. He realized that the man he had made wait in the rain, the man he had forced to clean shoes, the man he had tried to humiliate, was the man holding the deed to his life. "You," he whispered. "You set me up." "I did not set you up, Richard," I replied. "I just gave you a rope. You were the one who tied the noose. You were the one who kicked a man when he was down. You were the one who judged a book by its cover. Well, now you are going to learn the ending." I turned to the police officers. "Officer, this man is trespassing on my property. Please remove him." Richard lunged for me. He screamed a word that I will not repeat, a word full of hate and history. He tried to grab my throat, but he never got close. Tyrell stepped in front of me. He caught Richard's wrist in midair. He twisted it, forcing Richard to his knees. It was effortless. Tyrell looked down at the man who had called him trash. "Get your hands off my father," Tyrell said, his voice low and dangerous. The officers swarmed. They grabbed Richard, pulling him up and cuffing his hands behind his back. He was screaming, thrashing like a wild animal, kicking at the champagne puddle, splashing wine onto his tuxedo. He looked pathetic. He looked small. I looked out at the audience, at the people who had laughed at me a week ago. "The party is over," I said. "Take your gift bags and go. And the next time you see a man in work clothes, remember this night. Remember that the person cleaning your floor might just be the person who owns the building." I dropped the microphone onto the stage. It landed with a heavy thud, signaling the end of the Kensington era and the beginning of the Hammond reign. The room descended into chaos, but I did not watch. I turned my back on them and walked toward my son. We had one more piece of trash to collect. The chaos on the stage did not stop with Richard being dragged away in handcuffs because the true source of the poison in our lives was still standing there free. Victoria watched her father figure being hauled off like a common criminal, and for a split second I saw real fear in her eyes. But fear in a predator does not lead to flight, it leads to aggression. She realized her safety net was gone. She realized the money she thought she had married into was evaporating before her eyes. She looked at me standing there in my old gray suit, holding the microphone that commanded the room, and something inside her snapped. She did not run, she attacked. Victoria lunged at me with a speed that was terrifying. Her face was twisted into a mask of pure hatred that no amount of expensive makeup could hide. She screamed, and it was not a human sound. It was the shriek of a banshee denied her prize. "You are a liar," she screamed, her voice cracking under the strain. "You are a fraud. Where did you get that money? You stole it. You are nothing but a thief." She reached for my face, her nails curved like talons, aiming for my eyes. She wanted to hurt me. She wanted to erase the man who had ruined her perfect con. "Police, arrest him!" she shrieked, flailing her arms as Tyrell stepped calmly between us, blocking her path. "Arrest this old man. He is a criminal. He robbed a bank. There is no way a garbage man has $1 billion. It is all fake. The screens are fake. The lawyers are fake." She turned to the crowd, her chest heaving, her eyes wild. "Do not believe him," she yelled at the stunned guests. "Look at him. Look at his shoes. Look at his hands. He is dirty. He is trying to trick you all. He is jealous of us. He is jealous of our class." She spun back to me, pointing a shaking finger. "You ruined my wedding. You ruined my life. I am going to sue you for everything you stole. I am going to make sure you die in prison." She was unraveling. The composure she had maintained for months, the elegant facade of the debutante, was melting away under the heat of the spotlight. She was projecting her own crimes onto me. It was a classic tactic of the guilty, but it was not going to work tonight. The audience was silent, not out of respect, but out of horror. They were watching a woman disintegrate. I did not move. I did not flinch. I just looked at her with a calm detachment. I let her scream. I let her show everyone exactly who she was. I waited until she paused for breath, until the echoes of her accusations hung heavy in the air. "Are you finished, Victoria?" I asked quietly. She glared at me, panting. "I am not finished until you are in cuffs," she spat. "Then you are going to be disappointed," I said, "because the only person leaving here in chains is you." Tyrell stepped forward. He moved with a grace and power I had never seen in him before. The Italian suit fit him like armor, but his confidence came from within. He looked at the woman he had once planned to marry. He looked at the woman who had slapped him on stage a week ago. There was no love left in his eyes. There was no hurt. There was only the cold clarity of a judge passing sentence. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small remote control. He held it up so she could see it. "You talk a lot about thieves," Victoria Tyrell said, his voice amplified by the microphone, steady and deep. "You talk a lot about fraud. You talk a lot about class. But you forgot the most important rule of the con. Never leave a paper trail." Victoria froze. Her eyes darted to the remote in his hand. "What are you doing?" she whispered. "I am introducing you to the room," Tyrell said. "The real you." He pressed the button. The massive LED screen behind us shifted again. The orange logo of Hammond Holdings disappeared. In its place, a police dossier appeared. It was magnified to 20 feet high. It was a mugshot. It was grainy and unflattering, but there was no mistaking the face. It was Victoria, but with bleached blonde hair and a hardness around the eyes. The name under the booking number was not Victoria Kensington. It was Vicky Valles. A gasp went through the room. Victoria turned around slowly. She looked up at her own face, staring back at her from the screen. Her knees buckled slightly. "That is not me," she stammered, backing away. "That is a fake. You photoshopped that." Tyrell pressed the button again. The image changed. It was a list of charges from the Florida State Department of Corrections: insurance fraud, identity theft, bigamy, grand larceny. "You have been busy," Vicky Tyrell said, reading from the screen. "You married a man in Miami 3 years ago and cleaned out his retirement fund before disappearing. You married a man in Texas 2 years ago and forged his signature on a life insurance policy. You are not a socialite. You are a predator." "Lies!" she screamed, covering her ears. "It is all lies." Tyrell pressed the button a third time. "And then there is this," he said. Video footage began to play on the giant screen. The sound quality was crisp. It was footage from inside a VIP booth at a nightclub in downtown Manhattan. The timestamp was dated 2 nights before our wedding. In the video, Victoria was sitting with 2 friends drinking champagne. She looked drunk. She looked happy. "So, are you excited about the wedding?" one friend asked. Victoria laughed on the screen. It was a cruel mocking sound. "Excited about the money," she said, slurring her words slightly. "I cannot stand him. He is so needy. He follows me around like a puppy, but I heard his aunt left him some land in Jersey. As soon as we sign the papers, I am going to make him sell it. I will cash out and dump him before the honeymoon is over." The crowd in the Metropolitan Hall watched in stunned silence. On screen, Victoria took another sip of champagne. "Honestly, it is embarrassing being seen with him," she continued in the video. "He is so desperate for my approval. He thinks I love him. It is pathetic. But hey, a girl's got to get paid right. I will drain him dry and move on to the next mark." Tyrell paused the video on her laughing face. The image froze, capturing her greed in high definition. He lowered the remote. He looked at the woman standing in front of him. She was trembling. Her face was pale as a sheet. She looked small. She looked exposed. "You do not love me," Tyrell said softly into the microphone. His voice carried a weight of sadness, but it was the sadness of closing a book, not the sadness of heartbreak. "You never loved me. You loved the idea of me. You loved the safety you thought I could provide. You loved my imaginary wallet." He took a step closer to her, forcing her to look him in the eye. "You thought I was an easy target. You thought because I was kind I was weak. You thought because my father was a garbage man we were stupid. You made a calculation, Victoria. You bet your future on my poverty." He gestured to the screen to the logo of Hammond Holdings that had reappeared. "It is too bad that the wallet you were chasing was empty. But the real wallet, the one my father built with 40 years of sweat and genius, is bigger than you could ever comprehend. It is bigger than your greed. It is bigger than your lies. And it is completely out of your reach." Victoria looked at him. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She looked at the crowd. She saw the phones recording her. She saw the expressions of disgust on the faces of the socialites she had tried so hard to impress. Her social climbing ladder had just shattered into 1,000,000 pieces. "I loved you," Tyrell said, his voice hardening. "I would have given you the world. I would have worked 3 jobs to make you happy. But you did not want a partner. You wanted a victim." He turned his back on her. It was a gesture of finality. It was a dismissal. "Officer," he said, "she is all yours." From the shadows at the edge of the stage, 2 officers stepped forward. One was a female officer with a stern face. She held a pair of handcuffs. "Victoria Kensington," the officer said, "or should I say, Vicky Velez, you are under arrest." Victoria tried to run. It was a foolish instinct. She spun around in her high heels, trying to dart toward the back of the stage. But there was nowhere to go. The exits were blocked. The world was watching. She tripped over the train of her expensive gown and fell hard onto the floor, splashing into the puddle of champagne I had created earlier. She scrambled backward, crab walking away from the officers. Her hair was coming loose from its pins. Her mascara was running, creating black streaks down her face. The mask of the perfect debutante had completely dissolved, revealing the frightened criminal beneath. "No!" she screamed, kicking her legs. "You cannot arrest me. I am a Kensington. My father owns this city. Your father is in a police car outside," the officer said calmly, grabbing Victoria's arm and hauling her to her feet. "And you are a fugitive from justice." The officer spun her around and slammed her against the podium. The sound of the handcuffs clicking shut was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of closure. "You are charged with extortion, fraud, and violation of parole in the state of Florida," the officer recited. "You are also being charged with filing a false police report regarding the domestic abuse allegations you made online." Victoria thrashed against the restraints. She looked out at the audience, her eyes searching for anyone who would help her. "Help me," she begged. "Someone help me. He is setting me up. It is a conspiracy." No one moved. No one spoke. No one. They watched her with the cold detachment of people watching a car crash. They had seen the video. They had seen the dossier. They knew exactly who she was now. As the officers dragged her across the stage, she began to scream obscenities. She cursed Tyrell. She cursed me. She cursed the people in the room. Her voice was raw and ugly, echoing off the vaulted ceiling. "You are all trash," she screamed. "You are all garbage." I watched her go. I watched as they hauled her down the stairs and through the crowd. People pulled back, making a wide path for her, not wanting to be touched by her desperation. Tyrell walked over to me. He stood by my side, watching the doors swing shut behind her. The silence in the room was heavy, but it was not oppressive. It was the silence of a storm that had finally passed. He put his hand on my shoulder. "We did it, Dad," he whispered. "Yes, son," I said. "We took out the trash." I looked down at the mop still resting against the podium. I looked at the broken glass. I looked at the stunned faces of the city elite. The night was not over yet. We had exposed the daughter. We had captured the father. But there was still a debt to be settled with the rest of the Kensington clan. There was still a mother who had thrown a rag at my feet. There was still a legacy to dismantle. I picked up the microphone one last time. "Please enjoy the rest of your evening," I said to the room. "The bar is open, and it is on the house." I dropped the mic. We walked off the stage, leaving the chaos behind us. We had won the battle, but the war for our dignity was just entering its final phase. We walked out the front doors into the cool night air, leaving the smell of stale champagne and lies behind us. The cleanup was complete. Now it was time to rebuild. The arrest of his fake daughter should have been the moment Richard Kensington surrendered. But arrogance is a powerful drug, and he had been overdosing on it for 40 years. He watched the police drag Victoria out the side door, and then he turned back to me. His face was a map of broken veins and purple rage. He was not defeated yet. In his mind, he was still the King of New York, and I was just a usurper standing on his stage. "You think this is over?" he screamed, his voice shredding the silence of the Metropolitan Hall. "You think because you bought some bad debt you own me? You are nothing, Lester. You are a janitor in a suit." He pointed a shaking finger at the floor. "This company might be yours. Fine. Take the trucks. Take the warehouses. They are full of rot anyway. But you will never touch my home. My estate is protected. It is in a trust. It is personal property. I have homestead exemptions. I have lawyers who will tie you up in court for the next century." He was panting, sweating through his tuxedo. He looked out at the crowd, searching for an ally. "I am Richard Kensington," he bellowed. "I built this city. I know the judges. I know the senators." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. His hands were shaking so badly he almost dropped it. "I'm calling Mayor Higgins right now," he announced to the room. "We had lunch yesterday. He will shut this circus down. He will have you arrested for trespassing and harassment." I stood there calmly with my hands clasped behind my back. I looked at Goldberg. Goldberg checked his watch. He did not look worried. He looked bored. Richard put the phone to his ear. The room was so quiet that even from 10 feet away I could hear the ringing tone. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Richard's eyes darted around the room. He was smiling, a manic, terrified smile. "He is just busy," Richard muttered. "He will pick up. He always picks up for me." The ringing continued. 4 times, 5 times. Then it clicked. Richard's face lit up. "Gerald," he shouted. "Thank God. Listen, I have a situation at the hall. I need you to send—" He stopped. His face fell. The color drained out of him, leaving him gray and pasty. It was not the mayor. It was voicemail. "This is the office of Mayor Gerald Higgins." The automated voice chirped loudly enough for the front row to hear. "The mayor is unavailable at this time." Richard redialed. He jabbed at the screen with frantic fingers. "Pick up," he hissed. "Pick up, you coward." He tried again and again. He called his golf partner, the district attorney. Voicemail. He called his banker. Voicemail. He called the editor of the city newspaper who had promised him a cover story. Voicemail. The reality began to set in. The rats were not just leaving the ship. They had already swum to shore and dried off. They knew. In the world of high finance and political power, bad news travels faster than light. Goldberg had filed the foreclosure papers an hour ago. The alerts had hit every Bloomberg terminal in the city. Richard Kensington was toxic. He was radioactive, and nobody wanted to be contaminated. Richard lowered the phone slowly. He looked at the screen as if it had betrayed him. He looked at the crowd. The people who had drunk his champagne and eaten his caviar were now looking at their shoes or whispering to each other. They were distancing themselves. "No one is coming, Richard." I said, my voice soft but amplified by the acoustics of the stage. The phone is not broken. Your influence is. You cannot take my house, he whispered. It was a plea disguised as a threat. It is all I have left. It has been in my family for 3 generations. It is my sanctuary. Goldberg stepped forward. He opened a new folder. He pulled out the document Richard had signed 48 hours ago. The document he had not bothered to read because he was too busy planning a party. Mr. Kensington Goldberg said, his voice cutting through the air like a scalpel. When you signed the bridge loan agreement with Phoenix Ventures, you agreed to a standard cross-collateralization clause. Richard blinked. Cross what? Collateralization. Goldberg repeated slowly, as if speaking to a child. It means that because your company assets were already leveraged to the hilt and insufficient to secure the new $5 million loan, you pledged your personal assets as additional security. No, Richard said, shaking his head. No, I did not. I would never do that. Goldberg held up the page. It was blown up on the massive screen behind us. There was Richard's signature, bold and arrogant, and right above it was the paragraph he had ignored. Paragraph 4, Section B, Goldberg read aloud. The borrower hereby grants the lender a first priority security interest in all personal real property, including but not limited to the primary residence located at 142 Crestwood Drive, Upper Saddle River, New Jersey. The address echoed in the hall. It was the address of the fortress I had stood outside of in the rain. Furthermore, Goldberg continued reading the next line. Due to the triggering of the morality clause and the immediate default status of the loan, the lender exercises the right to immediate possession. Goldberg lowered the paper. He looked Richard in the eye. The house does not belong to you anymore, Mr. Kensington. It belongs to Mr. Hammond. The deed was transferred electronically 20 minutes ago. Richard looked at me. His eyes were bulging. He looked like a man whose heart was about to explode. You stole my house, he choked out. I did not steal it, Richard, I said. I bought it. I paid $5 million for it. That is the price of your vanity. You traded your grandfather's legacy for a party. I hope the shrimp cocktail was worth it. Goldberg checked his watch again. According to the eviction order signed by Judge Miller, a man you know well, I believe you have 60 minutes to vacate the premises. 60 minutes, Richard whispered. Yes, Goldberg said. 60 minutes to remove personal effects. Anything left on the property after midnight becomes the property of the new owner. I suggest you start driving. It is a 45-minute drive to New Jersey. That leaves you 15 minutes to pack a bag. The cruelty of the math hit him. He had no time. He could not save the art. He could not save the furniture. He could not save the jewelry in the safe. He would leave with the clothes on his back. Richard made a sound that was half sob, half growl. He looked around the room. He saw the logo of Hammond Holdings burning on the screen. He saw Tyrell looking like a king in his Italian suit. He saw me, the garbage man, holding the deed to his life. His mind snapped. The veneer of civilization peeled away. He was no longer a CEO. He was a cornered animal. I will kill you, he screamed. He grabbed a bottle of wine from a nearby table. It was a heavy magnum of red wine. He held it by the neck like a club. He charged at me. He moved fast for a man his age, fueled by the adrenaline of total ruin. He swung the bottle, aiming for my head. He wanted to smash my skull. He wanted to end the nightmare by erasing the dreamer. I did not flinch. I did not move. I did not have to. 2 men in dark suits materialized from the shadows of the stage wings. They were my personal security detail, former Special Forces operators I had hired to protect my assets. They moved with a fluidity that made Richard look like he was moving in slow motion. The first guard stepped in and caught Richard's wrist mid-swing. There was a sickening crack as the bone gave way under the pressure. The bottle fell from Richard's hand and shattered on the floor, spilling red wine that looked like blood across the white stage. Richard screamed in pain, but the guard was not done. He swept Richard's legs out from under him. Richard hit the floor hard. The breath left his body in a whoosh. Before he could inhale, the second guard was on him, pressing a knee into his back, pinning him to the ground. "Get off me," Richard wheezed, spitting wine and saliva. "Do you know who I am? You are a trespasser," the guard said calmly, twisting Richard's arm behind his back and applying a zip tie. They hauled him to his feet. His tuxedo was ruined, stained with wine and dust. His hair was wild. His face was pressed against the floor a moment ago, and now he had a red mark on his cheek. He looked at me with eyes full of madness. "You will pay for this, Lester," he spat. "I will sue you. I will burn that house down before I let you have it." "Add arson threats to the list of charges," Goldberg said, noting it on his pad. "Take him out," I said, waving my hand. "He is polluting the air." The guards dragged him. They did not walk him out gently. They dragged him. His feet scrambled for purchase on the slippery floor, but he could not find footing. He was hauled off the stage and down the aisle. He passed the people he had tried to impress. He passed the bankers who had denied his calls. He passed the press who were now taking photos of his downfall, not his glory. He was dragged out of the main doors, kicking and screaming like an unruly child. The doors slammed shut, cutting off his profanity. I looked back at the stage. There was one Kensington left. Patricia was sitting on a white velvet sofa near the front of the stage. She had watched the arrest of her daughter. She had watched the destruction of her husband. She sat frozen, her face a mask of shock. She was clutching her pearl necklace so hard I thought the string would snap. She looked at me. Her eyes were wide and vacant. She looked at the screen where the foreclosure notice was still displayed. She looked at the address, 142 Crestwood Drive, her home. She realized what it meant. She realized she was not going back to her garden. She was not going back to her walk-in closet. She was not going back to her life. She looked at the sofa she was sitting on. It was a piece of rental furniture brought in for the event, but in her mind she was already homeless. She let out a small whimpering sound. Her eyes rolled back in her head. She slumped sideways. She fainted, sliding off the velvet cushions and collapsing onto the floor in a heap of expensive silk. I looked at her. I felt no pity. I remembered the rags she had thrown at my feet. I remembered the mud on her shoes. "Someone call a paramedic," I said into the microphone, my voice flat, "and make sure she does not stain the carpet. That rug belongs to me now." Tyrell walked over to the edge of the stage and looked down at her. He looked back at me. "She fainted," he said. "She is tired," I replied. "It is exhausting being that fake for that long." I turned to the crowd. The room was silent, waiting for the next act. "The show is over," I announced. "Go home, check your own debts, hug your children, and pray you never owe me money." I walked off the stage. Tyrell followed me. We walked past the fainting woman, past the spilled wine, past the shattered glass. We walked out of the hall and into the night. The air was cold and clean. The rain had stopped. "We have a drive to make," I told Tyrell. "We have a house to inspect, and I have a feeling the previous owners left a mess." The double doors of the Metropolitan Hall slammed shut with a finality that echoed like a prison cell closing. Outside, the air was biting cold. The rain that had threatened all evening finally broke, falling in sheets of freezing gray water that washed the glamour off the streets of New York. Richard and Patricia Kensington stood on the curb shivering. They looked like statues of misery abandoned by their worshippers. They held nothing but the small clutch purse Patricia had carried into the gala and the ruined tuxedo on Richard's back. I sat in my truck across the street watching them. Tyrell sat beside me, silent and observant. We watched the dismantling of a dynasty. It happened fast. A tow truck with yellow flashing lights pulled up to the curb where Richard's limousine was parked. The driver jumped out with a clipboard. Richard ran toward him, screaming, waving his arms like a madman. He tried to block the driver from hooking up the car. He shouted about ownership and lawsuits. The driver ignored him. He was just doing his job, executing a repossession order that had been filed 20 minutes ago. The hook snapped into place. The hydraulics whined. The long, sleek black car was lifted into the air, its wheels spinning helplessly. It was dragged away, disappearing into the rainy night, leaving Richard standing in a puddle of exhaust fumes. They tried to call a taxi. I saw Richard tapping frantically on his phone. Then he stared at the screen and threw it onto the sidewalk. His ride-sharing accounts had been linked to his credit cards, and his credit cards were now dead plastic. They were stranded. Then came the hardest blow of all. The guests began to leave the hall. The bankers, the politicians, the socialites, the people who had drunk Richard's wine and eaten his food for decades. Their limousines glided past the curb where the Kensingtons stood. I saw Richard wave at a car. I recognized the passenger. It was a man Richard played golf with every Sunday. The man saw Richard. He saw the wet clothes and the desperation, and then he turned his head. He looked the other way. The window did not roll down. The car did not slow. It accelerated, splashing dirty gutter water onto Patricia's legs. They were invisible. In the world of the elite, poverty is a contagion. You do not touch it. You do not acknowledge it. You drive past it and hope it does not stain your tires. They stood there for 20 minutes. Their posture collapsed. Richard the Lion was now just a wet old man. Patricia the Queen was a trembling woman in a soaked dress. They were freezing. They had no money. They had no home. They had no friends. They were experiencing for the first time in their lives what it meant to be truly alone in a city that eats the weak. I put the truck in gear. I pulled away from the curb slowly. My headlights swept over them, illuminating their misery. I could have kept driving. I could have left them to the mercy of the night. But that would have been too easy. That would have been abandonment, not justice. Justice requires witnessing the consequence. As I drove past, Patricia saw me. Her eyes widened. Recognition and desperation flooded her face. She did not look at me with hate anymore. She looked at me as her only lifeline. She broke away from Richard. She ran after my truck. She was not running with grace. She was stumbling, her high heels clacking unevenly on the pavement. "Mr. Hammond," she screamed. Her voice was thin and shrill against the wind. "Please wait." She caught up to the truck as I stopped at a red light. She pounded on the passenger window. Her makeup was streaked down her face, making her look like a weeping clown. She was shivering so hard her teeth chattered. "Please," she sobbed. "Open the door. Please." I looked at Tyrell. He looked at the woman who had called him a peasant. He did not unlock the door. He looked at me, waiting for my command. I rolled down the window halfway. The cold rain blew in, hitting my face. "What do you want, Patricia?" I asked, my voice flat. She looked at the gap in the window. She tried to reach her hand in, but the gap was too small. She collapsed. She fell to her knees right there in the street. She knelt in a puddle of oil and black water. The dirty liquid soaked into her expensive dress, ruining it instantly. She was kneeling in the filth just as she had made me kneel on her marble floor. The symmetry was perfect. "Mr. Hammond, we have nowhere to go," she cried. Her hands were clasped in prayer. "They took everything. Richard's cards do not work. They took the house. We cannot stay on the street. We are old people. We will die out here. It is freezing. Please have mercy." She looked up at me. The arrogance was gone. It had been scrubbed away by fear. "We made a mistake," she whispered. "We were wrong. We are so sorry. Just give us a ride. Give us a few dollars for a hotel. Anything. Please. I am begging you." I looked at Richard. He had walked up behind her. He did not kneel, but he did not stop her. He stood there, heads bowed, defeated. He was letting his wife beg because he was too much of a coward to do it himself. I looked at Patricia kneeling in the mud. I remembered the rag she had thrown at my feet. I remembered her voice telling me I missed a spot. I remembered her laughing as I cleaned her shoes. I unlocked the doors, but I did not invite them in. I opened my door and stepped out onto the running board of the truck so I could look down at them. I did not offer a hand to help her up. "You say you are old," I said, my voice cutting through the sound of the rain. "You say you cannot survive the night. You are probably right. The shelters are full and the streets are dangerous for people who do not know how to fight." Patricia nodded, weeping. "Help us. I am a businessman." "Patricia," I said, "I do not give handouts. I give opportunities." I reached into the glove box and pulled out a business card. It was not for the executive offices. It was for the field operations division. "I have a vacancy," I said, holding the card out of the window. "At processing plant number 5 in the Bronx. We are short-staffed on the night shift." Patricia looked at the card confused. "Work?" she asked. "Yes, work," I said. "Hard work. Honest work. The position is for sanitation maintenance. Specifically, we need people to scrub the employee latrines and sort the organic waste that comes in from the restaurants. It is smelly, it is dirty, it involves heavy lifting." Richard stepped forward, his face twisting in revulsion. "You want us to scrub toilets?" he choked out. "I want you to survive," I countered. "The job comes with a dormitory bed. It comes with 3 hot meals a day in the cafeteria. And it pays minimum wage. It is a roof over your head. It is food in your belly. It is more than you offered me when I stood outside your gate." I looked at Richard. "You called me a garbage man like it was an insult. Now I am offering you the chance to become one. You can learn the value of $1. You can learn what it feels like to clean up after other people." I dangled the card. "Take it or leave it. The bus to the Bronx leaves from the corner in 10 minutes. If you are not on it, you sleep on the sidewalk." Patricia looked at Richard. She looked at the cold, dark street. She looked at the passing cars that offered no help. She looked at her ruined dress. She realized she had hit rock bottom. There was no dignity left to save. There was only survival. She reached up with a trembling hand. Her fingers were stained with mud. She took the card. She took the pictogram. "We will take it," she whispered. Her head hung low. "Good," I said. "Report to the foreman. His name is Miller. Tell him Lester sent you. Tell him you are ready to learn." I got back into the truck and rolled up the window. I did not wait for them to thank me. They did not have the words. I put the truck in gear. Tyrell watched them in the side mirror as we drove away. "They are walking to the bus stop," he said quietly. "Good," I said. "They are going to scrub toilets, Dad," he said. "Richard Kensington is going to scrub toilets." "It is honest work, son," I replied, staring at the rain-slicked road. "It is the first honest thing they will have done in 40 years. Maybe it will save their souls, or maybe it will just break their backs. Either way, the balance is restored." We drove into the night, leaving the former kings of New York to wait for the bus. They were no longer the elite. They were employees of Hammond Holdings, and their shift was just beginning. The rain had stopped by the time we reached the highway, but the silence in the cab of the truck was heavy enough to drown out the engine noise. Tyrell stared out the passenger window, watching the city lights blur past like streaks of fire. He was not looking at the view. He was replaying the image of his former in-laws climbing onto a city bus. Their expensive clothes ruined their dignity, shredded. I could feel the tension radiating off him. It was a mixture of satisfaction and confusion. He had watched me destroy them, and then he had watched me offer them a job. He could not reconcile the two actions. "Dad," he said, finally breaking the silence. "Why did you do that?" I kept my eyes on the road, navigating the heavy traffic leading out of the city. "Do what, son? Why did you give them a job?" Tyrell turned in his seat to look at me. His face was tight with frustration. "You had them. You took their house. You took their company. They were standing in the gutter. They were going to freeze. They were going to starve. Why save them? Why not let the cold finish what we started? They would not have thrown us a rope if the roles were reversed. They would have laughed while we drowned." I tapped the steering wheel thoughtfully. "You are right, Tyrell. They would have let us die, but that is because they are weak men, fear the competition. Strong men cultivate it. You think I saved them because I felt sorry for them. You think I offered them a job out of the goodness of my heart?" Tyrell nodded. "Isn't that what it was?" "Mercy," I laughed. It was a low, dry sound. Mercy is for people who made a mistake and want to fix it. Richard and Patricia did not make a mistake. They made a lifestyle choice to be predators. If I let them freeze on the sidewalk, they become victims. In their minds, they become martyrs. They tell themselves that the world was unfair, that they were robbed by a vengeful employee. They die believing they were better than us. I glanced at Tyrell, making sure he understood this lesson because it was the most important one I could teach him regarding power. "If they die tonight, their suffering ends," I said. "But if they work, if they wake up tomorrow morning in a dormitory bed that smells like bleach and industrial cleaner, if they put on a uniform with my name stitched on the pocket, if they have to punch a clock at 6 in the morning and scrub the filth off the floors of my factory, then they have to think. They have to think about every choice that led them there." I slowed the truck down, taking the exit toward our part of town. "I want them to live, Tyrell. I want them to live for a long time. I want Richard to look at his hands at the end of the day and see the dirt under his fingernails. I want him to feel the ache in his back. I want him to know that the food he is eating was paid for by his own sweat, not by a loan he never intended to pay back. That is not mercy, son. That is education. It is the slow burn of realization. I am forcing them to respect the work they mocked their entire lives. Every toilet they scrub is a reminder of who is really in charge." Tyrell sat back in his seat, absorbing the words. He looked out the window again, but this time he was not looking at the past. He was looking at the future. I could see the gears turning in his brilliant engineer mind. He was realizing that true revenge is not just about destruction, it is about restructuring reality so that your enemies have to live in the world you built. "So they are not employees," Tyrell said softly. "They are prisoners. They are students," I corrected. "And class is in session. The tuition is minimum wage. And the best part is, they will thank me for it. Every time they cash that check, they will hate me, but they will also need me. That is control. Tyrell, that is how you break a person who thinks they are unbreakable. You make them dependent on the very thing they despised. We pulled into the driveway of the shack. The headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the trees and the quiet solitude of our home. It looked the same as it always had, but everything had changed inside us. We were no longer hiding. We were no longer waiting. The war was over, and now it was time to build something new on the scorched earth. Get some rest, I told Tyrell as we walked up the porch steps. Tomorrow is a big day. You are not going to the recycling plant tomorrow. You are going to the glass tower downtown, the one we just acquired. Tyrell looked at me, surprised. Me why? Because Richard Kensington ran a logistics company into the ground, but he had a technology division that was actually valuable. I said I looked at the paperwork Goldberg sent over. They have patents, they have infrastructure, they just lacked leadership. Richard used that division to launder money and hide debt. You are going to go in there and you are going to clean it up. You are going to turn it into something real. The next morning, Tyrell put on his Italian suit again, but this time he did not look like he was wearing a costume. He looked like he was wearing a uniform. Drove his truck to the glass office building in the financial district. The sign out front still said Kensington Logistics, but a crew was already there tearing it down. Sparks flew as they cut through the steel letters. Tyrell watched the K fall to the ground with a loud clang. He did not smile. He just walked past the debris and into the lobby. The security guards recognized him. They had seen the news. They snapped to attention, terrified that they would be fired. Tyrell walked past them without a word. He took the elevator to the top floor to the office that had once belonged to Richard. The office was a shrine to vanity. There were oil paintings of Richard everywhere. There were trophies for golf tournaments he had probably paid to win. The desk was made of endangered wood. Tyrell stood in the center of the room looking at the excess. It smelled of stale cigars and desperation. He picked up the phone on the desk. "Send in the maintenance crew," he ordered. Within an hour, the office was stripped. The paintings were taken down and sent to storage. The heavy curtains were pulled open, letting the sunlight flood the room. Tyrell ordered the gold-plated nameplate to be thrown in the trash. He replaced it with a simple steel plaque that read Hammond Tech. He called an all-hands meeting. The employees gathered in the main conference room. They looked scared. They expected mass layoffs. They expected the new owner to gut the company and sell it for parts. They knew that Richard had destroyed the pension fund. They knew the company was toxic. Tyrell stood at the head of the table. He did not shout. He did not make a grand speech. He placed a stack of files on the table. "My name is Tyrell Hammond," he said. His voice was calm, authoritative. "I am the new CEO of this company. As of this morning, the Kensington name is gone. We are Hammond Tech. We build software. We build logistics solutions. We do not build egos." He looked around the room, making eye contact with the engineers and the project managers. "I know what Richard did to this place." Tyrell continued. "I know he fired the best talent because they asked too many questions. I know he cut corners on safety to pay for his parties. I have the list of every person who was wrongfully terminated in the last 5 years." He opened the first file. "I am rehiring them, starting today. Everyone who was fired for trying to do the right thing gets their job back with a 20% raise. Everyone who stayed and kept this ship afloat while the captain was drilling holes in the hull gets a retention bonus." A murmur went through the room. It was the sound of hope returning to a place that had been dead for a long time. "But things are going to be different," Tyrell said, raising his voice slightly. "We do not operate on favors anymore. We do not operate on nepotism. If you work hard, you move up. If you lie, you are out. I do not care who your father is. I do not care where you went to school. I care about what you can build." He pointed to the window to the city skyline. "My father taught me that value is hidden in the things people overlook. He taught me that you can build a fortune from trash if you are willing to get your hands dirty. We are going to get our hands dirty. We are going to take the mess Richard left behind, and we are going to turn it into gold. Not for him, for us." The room erupted in applause. It was not polite applause. It was the applause of people who had been waiting for a leader. Tyrell did not bask in it. He nodded, signaled for them to get back to work, and walked out of the room. He spent the next week living in that office. He went through every contract, every line of code. He found the hidden accounts Richard used to siphon money. He found the shell companies. He dismantled the corruption. Brick by brick. He fired the sycophants who had helped Richard hide his losses. He promoted the quiet workers who had actually done the labor. I visited him a week later. I walked into the office and saw the changes. The gold was gone. The pretension was gone. The air felt cleaner. The people were working with a focus I had not seen in years. Tyrell was sitting at a simple desk surrounded by monitors. He was typing code. His tie loosened his sleeves, rolled up. He looked like me 40 years ago minus the orange jumpsuit. He looked like a man building an empire. "How's it going, son?" I asked, standing in the doorway. He looked up. He smiled. It was a tired smile, but it was real. "It is a mess, Dad," he said. "Richard really did a number on the books, but the tech is solid. We can save it. We are already profitable on paper if we cut the executive bloat." I walked over to the window and looked down at the street. The world looked different from up here. It looked like a puzzle we had finally solved. "You did good, Tyrell," I said. "You did not just take his chair, you took his power. You earned the respect of these people. Richard demanded it. You earned it." Tyrell stood up and joined me at the window. "I finally understand what you meant," he said, "about clean money. It feels different knowing I fixed this. Knowing I did not just inherit it, I had to fight for it. That is the only money worth having," I said. "The money you fight for is the money you keep. The money that is handed to you slips through your fingers like water, just like it did for Richard." Tyrell looked at me, his expression serious. "Speaking of Richard, have you heard from the plant?" I nodded. "Foreman Miller called me this morning. Richard passed out yesterday trying to lift a crate of spoiled vegetables. He is in the infirmary. Patricia is complaining about her back, but she is still working. She asked if she could have an extra blanket for her bunk." "Did you give it to her?" Tyrell asked. "I did," I said. "We are not monsters, son. We just want them to be comfortable enough to wake up and work again tomorrow." Tyrell looked back at the city Hammond Tech. He said, testing the name. "It sounds good. It sounds permanent," I agreed. "Now come on. Let us go get some dinner. I know a place that serves a great burger. And we do not need a reservation." We left the glass tower, walking out past the security guards who nodded with genuine respect. Tyrell Hammond was no longer the groom who was left at the altar. He was the CEO of the hottest tech turnaround in the city, and he had done it without lifting a finger in anger. He had done it by being better, smarter, and harder than the people who tried to break him. The rebuilding was well underway, and the foundation was solid stone. 3 months of peace is a luxury when you have spent a lifetime fighting for scraps. But in the business of waste management, you learn that trash always floats back to the surface. Eventually, Victoria had managed to secure a bail bond, likely by defrauding another unsuspecting soul or pawning the last of her hidden jewelry. She was desperate, and desperate people are dangerous, but they are also predictable. I was sitting in my office at the recycling plant when the security alert from Hammond Tech flashed on my monitor. I pulled up the live feed. From the lobby cameras, expecting a delivery issue or a minor dispute, what I saw was a performance worthy of Broadway. Victoria was standing on the sidewalk directly in front of the glass doors of Hammond Tech. She was not wearing designer clothes today. She was wearing a maternity dress that looked threadbare and stretched tight over a massive protruding belly. She held a megaphone in one hand and her phone in the other, live streaming to whatever audience she had left. She was weeping theatrically, her tears streaming down her face as she pointed at the building. "He abandoned us," she wailed into the megaphone, her voice cracking for maximum effect. Tyrell Hammond, the billionaire, CEO, left his pregnant fiancée to rot in a jail cell. He does not care about his own flesh and blood. He is starving his unborn son. A crowd had gathered. It was lunch hour in the financial district, and a crying pregnant woman screaming at a glass tower is a magnet for attention. People were filming, phones were raised high, capturing her accusations. Some onlookers looked sympathetic, shaking their heads at the cruelty of the rich. Others just wanted to see the train wreck. Victoria played to them, perfectly turning so her profile showed the swell of her stomach. "I am carrying the Hammond heir," she screamed, rubbing her belly. "He thinks he can throw me away like garbage, but he cannot throw away his son. I want support. I want medical care. I want him to come down here and look me in the eye." I reached for my phone to call Tyrell to tell him to lock the doors and call security, but I stopped. My hand hovered over the dial button. I remembered the look in his eyes when he took over the company. I remembered the way he had fired the corrupt executives. Tyrell did not need his father to fight his battles anymore. He was a king now, and kings do not hide in their castles while peasants throw mud at the walls. I watched the screen. Tyrell walked out of the elevators. He was not alone. Flanking him were 2 uniformed police officers and a woman in a white lab coat carrying a medical case. He walked with a steady, measured stride. He pushed open the glass doors and stepped out onto the sidewalk. The wind whipped his tie, but he did not flinch. He looked at the crowd. He looked at the woman screaming his name. Victoria saw him and her eyes lit up. This was what she wanted. She wanted a confrontation. She wanted a settlement. She wanted him to pay her to go away. So she lowered the megaphone and put on her most pitiful expression. "Tyrell," she sobbed, "you came. You finally came. Look at what you have done to us." Tyrell stood 10 feet away from her. He did not shout. He did not look angry. He looked bored. He gestured to the woman in the white coat. "Victoria, this is Dr. Evans," Tyrell said, his voice carrying clearly over the noise of the street. "She is a court-appointed forensic obstetrician." Victoria froze. The sobbing stopped instantly. Her eyes darted from the doctor to the police officers. "What?" she stammered. "I do not need. Doctor, I need a check. I need child support." "You made a public claim," Tyrell continued, his voice cold and hard. "You claimed on a public platform that you are carrying my child. You are using that claim to demand financial compensation and to damage the reputation of my company. That is extortion, Victoria. Unless it is true." "It is true," she shrieked, clutching her stomach dramatically. "It is your son," Good Tyrell said. He pulled a folded document from his jacket pocket. He held it up for the crowd to see. "This is an emergency court order signed by a judge 20 minutes ago. It mandates an immediate, non-invasive medical examination to verify the pregnancy and establish a timeline for paternity testing. Since you are here claiming distress and claiming the child is at risk, we are going to do it right now." He pointed to the medical van that had just pulled up to the curb. "Dr. Evans has an ultrasound machine in the van. You will step inside. You will let her verify the heartbeat. If there is a baby, we will discuss support. If you refuse, you will be arrested immediately for harassment, attempted extortion, and violating the terms of your bail, which prohibit you from contacting me." The crowd went silent. The sympathy evaporated, replaced by a thick tension. Victoria looked at the van. She looked at the doctor. She looked at the police officers who were resting their hands on their belts, waiting for the signal. I cannot," she stuttered, backing away. "I am high risk. The stress. It is bad for the baby. I need to go home." "You are not going anywhere," Tyrell said, stepping forward. "You came to my place of business. You created a scene. You wanted attention. Victoria, well, you have it. You have the attention of the entire city. Now get in the van." Victoria looked around wildly. She was trapped. Her bluff had been called in the most spectacular way possible. She knew there was no baby. She knew that one touch of that ultrasound wand would reveal her lies. She looked at the crowd and saw that they were not on her side anymore. They were waiting for the proof. "You are hurting me," she screamed, trying to pivot back to the victim narrative. "You are bullying a pregnant woman." "Get in the van!" Tyrell roared. His voice cracked like a whip. It was the first time he had raised his voice, and it made everyone jump. "Get in the van or get in the police car. Those are your only 2 options." Victoria looked at Tyrell's face. She saw the resolve there. She saw that the boy she had manipulated was dead, and the man standing in front of her was made of iron. Panic took over logic. The survival instinct of the cornered rat kicked in. She turned and ran. She did not run gracefully. She was wearing cheap shoes that were too big for her, and the weight of the fake belly threw off her balance. She bolted toward the subway entrance, trying to disappear into the crowd. She did not make it 10 feet. She tripped over a crack in the sidewalk. Her arms flailed as she went down. She hit the concrete hard, screaming as she fell, and then the laws of physics exposed her lie. When she hit the ground, the impact dislodged the strap holding the prosthetic bump in place. The large foam cushion popped out from under her dress. It skittered across the pavement like a loose hubcap, bouncing twice before coming to rest at the feet of a cameraman. The crowd gasped. It was a collective sound of shock and amusement. The camera zoomed in on the foam belly lying in the dirt. It was a cheap theatrical prop stained with sweat and makeup. Victoria lay on the ground, her dress bunched up revealing her flat stomach. She scrambled to cover herself, but it was too late. The laughter started. It started as a few giggles and then erupted into a roar. The crowd was laughing at her. The internet was laughing at her. The world was laughing at her. She looked up, her face streaked with tears and dirt. She looked at the foam belly. She looked at Tyrell. Tyrell did not laugh. He did not gloat. He just stood there watching her with a look of profound pity. "It is over, Victoria," he said quietly. The police officers moved in. They helped her up, but they were not gentle. They pulled her arms behind her back. The sound of the handcuffs was the final punctuation mark on her career as a con artist. "You are under arrest," one officer said, reciting the charges. "Fraud, violation of bail conditions, public disturbance, and filing false claims." Victoria did not scream this time. She did not fight. She slumped in their grip, defeated. The fight had gone out of her. She was just Vicky Velez, now a petty criminal with a long rap sheet and no more cards to play. As they walked her toward the patrol car, she looked back at Tyrell one last time. "Why?" she whispered. "Why did you have to ruin me?" Tyrell looked at her, and then at the glass tower behind him, the building that bore our name. "I did not ruin you," he said. "You were always a ruin. I just turned on the lights." He turned around and walked back toward the entrance of his company. The crowd parted for him, clapping and cheering. He did not acknowledge them. He walked back into his world, leaving the circus behind. I watched it all from my monitor in the recycling plant. I leaned back in my chair and let out a long breath. It was done. The loose end had been cut. The threat had been neutralized. My son had stood on his own 2 feet and defended his castle. He had not needed me to save him. He had become the man I always knew he could be. I closed the video window. The image of the foam belly rolling across the sidewalk would stay with me forever, a symbol of the hollowness of the people who had tried to destroy us. They were all surface and no substance, fake gold and foam rubber. I picked up the phone and dialed Goldberg. "It is finished," I said. "I saw it," Goldberg replied. His voice sounded satisfied. "The district attorney is revoking her bail. She will be in federal custody by tonight. She is looking at 5 to 10 years for the fraud charges alone." "And Richard is still scrubbing toilets," I said. "Good," Goldberg said. "Let them stay where they belong." I hung up the phone. I looked out the window at the mountains of trash waiting to be processed. It was dirty work, but it was real, it was honest, and unlike the Kensingtons, it had value. I stood up and put on my hard hat. There was work to do. The trash never stops coming, and someone has to be there to turn it into gold. 1 year is a long time in the life of a business, but it is a blink of an eye in the life of a family. It took exactly 365 days for the scars of the Plaza Hotel to fade and be replaced by something real. Yesterday, my backyard was not filled with the smell of garbage or the sound of machinery. It was filled with the smell of barbecue ribs smoking over hickory wood and the sound of jazz music drifting through the summer air. Tyrell stood under the old oak tree that I used to climb when I was a boy. He was not wearing a $10,000 suit. He was wearing a simple linen shirt and slacks, but he looked more like a man than he ever had. In the Kensington's world, standing next to him was Maya. She was a music teacher at the local public school, a woman with calloused fingertips from playing the cello, and a laugh that made you want to tell her your best jokes. She did not care about the Hammond fortune. She did not know the extent of it until 3 months into their relationship, and when Tyrell told her she did not ask for a car, she asked if we could donate instruments to her students. There were no senators at this wedding. There were no CEOs trying to cut backroom deals. The guests were the men and women from the recycling plant, cleaning the grease from under their fingernails to hold champagne flutes. The guests were Maya's fellow teachers and her loud, joyful family who brought enough potato salad to feed an army. It was not a merger. It was a marriage. I stood at the back near the grill watching my son. He was not looking at the guests to see who was watching him. He was looking at his bride like she was the only person on earth. He held her hands, and when he said "I do," his voice did not waver. I remembered the fear in his eyes a year ago, the desperation to please people who hated him. That fear was gone. It had been burned away by the fire of truth. When the ceremony was over, there were no speeches, mocking the poor. There was only laughter and toasts made with cheap beer and good whiskey. I danced with Maya and she stepped on my toes and we laughed until our sides hurt. I looked at Tyrell spinning her around the grass and I knew that the cycle had been broken. The toxicity of the Kensington legacy had been washed away by the simple, honest love of a good woman. I did not give them a check for $50,000. This time, I gave them something better. I gave them the deed to a small house down the street from me. It was not a mansion. It was a home, a place with good bones and a strong foundation, just like their marriage. It was the best investment I had ever made. The party lasted until dawn. The sun came up over the trees illuminating the paper lanterns swaying in the breeze. We were tired. We were happy. We were free. It was the perfect ending to a year of war and the perfect beginning to a lifetime of peace. The next morning I woke up early out of habit. The house was quiet. Tyrell and Maya had left for their honeymoon, a road trip up the coast in a rented convertible. I made my coffee, black and strong, and walked out to the truck. It was a Sunday, but the city never sleeps, and neither does the trash. I wanted to inspect a new property I had acquired a few months ago. I drove into the city toward Central Park. The morning air was crisp. I parked near the maintenance shed of the Park Conservancy. Hammond Holdings had recently won the contract for waste management and groundskeeping for the entire park district. It was a lucrative contract, but it also gave me a certain satisfaction to know that I was responsible for keeping the city's crown jewel clean. I walked down the winding paths watching the runners and the early risers. I turned a corner near the Bethesda fountain, and there they were. Richard and Patricia Kensington were wearing bright orange jumpsuits with reflective stripes. On the back, in bold black letters, it read, Hammond Holdings Maintenance Crew. Richard was pushing a heavy broom, sweeping wet leaves and cigarette butts into a pile. Patricia was holding a large plastic bag, picking up trash with a grabber tool. They looked 20 years older than they had a year ago. Richard's silver hair was thinning and unkempt, hidden under a baseball cap. Patricia's face was lined with deep wrinkles, her manicure long gone, replaced by short functional nails and work gloves. They moved with the slow stiffness of people who were not used to physical labor, but who had no other choice. They were not talking, they were just working. Their heads were down, focused on the dirt, focused on the task, focused on survival. They had lost the mansion, they had lost the friends, they had lost the illusion of superiority. All they had left was the job I had given them. I stopped 10 feet away from them. Richard sensed someone watching him. He stopped sweeping and looked up. He squinted against the sun. When he saw me, his eyes widened for a fraction of a second. I expected hate. I expected him to throw the broom down and scream. I expected the old arrogance to flare up. But there was nothing. The fire was gone. It had been extinguished by 12 months of waking up at 4 in the morning and scrubbing floors. Richard Kensington, the man who had called me trash, looked at me and he slumped. His shoulders rolled forward in a posture of total submission. He nudged Patricia. She looked up. She saw me. Her hand went to her hair, instinctively trying to fix it before realizing it did not matter anymore. She lowered her hand. They did not say a word. They did not ask for money. They did not ask for forgiveness. They simply nodded. It was a small, jerky movement, a bow. It was the acknowledgement of the serf to the Lord. It was the admission that they knew exactly where they stood in the food chain. Now I looked at them for a long moment. I remembered the way Richard had laughed at my check. I remembered the way Patricia had thrown the rag at my feet. I felt the ghost of that anger, but it was faint now. It was replaced by a cold satisfaction. Keep up the good work, I said, my voice calm and steady. The park looks clean. Richard swallowed hard. Yes, sir, he croaked. His voice was raspy, unused to speaking with respect. I nodded and turned away, walking back toward my truck. I did not look back. I did not need to. I knew they would keep sweeping. I knew they would keep picking up the trash because they knew that if they stopped, they starved. I had not just defeated them. I had repurposed them. I had turned them into productive members of society. It was the ultimate recycling project. I drove back to the shack, feeling the weight of the last year lifting off my shoulders. The books were balanced. The debts were paid. The trash had been taken out. That evening, I sat on the porch of the shack. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of purple and orange. I held a can of cold beer in my hand. It was a cheap domestic brand, the kind I had been drinking for 40 years. I could have been drinking vintage wine. I could have been sitting on a yacht in the Mediterranean. But I preferred this. I preferred the creak of the wood under my chair and the sound of the crickets in the tall grass. I heard a car pull up the gravel driveway. It was Tyrell and Maya. They had come back to pick up some bags they had forgotten before heading out again. Tyrell walked up the steps and sat on the railing next to me. He looked out at the yard at the spot where the parking lot would have been if Richard had won. "It is quiet tonight," Tyrell said. "It is," I agreed. "It is a good quiet." Tyrell looked at me. He looked at the beer in my hand and the old work boots on my feet. "You know, Dad," he said softly, "I never understood it before. I never understood why you lived like this, why you made me work the line, why you hid it all. But I get it now. If you had given me the money when I was 20, I would have turned out like Victoria. I would have been soft." I took a sip of beer. "Money is like a tool." "Tyrell," I said, "it is like a hammer. You can use it to build a house, or you can use it to break your own thumb. You have to know how to hold it before you swing it." Tyrell smiled. He reached out and tapped the can of beer. "You taught me how to sort trash," he said. "You taught me how to separate the valuable from the worthless. And I am not talking about copper and plastic. I am talking about people. I am talking about character." I looked at my son. He was a man now, a leader, a husband. He was everything I had hoped he would be. "No problem, son," I said. "The world is full of garbage. It is full of fake gold and shiny plastic. It is full of people who think they are better than you because of what they wear or who they know. But trash or gold, it does not matter. What matters is who is holding it in their hand. What matters is what you do with it when the lights go out." I crushed the empty beer can in my hand and tossed it into the recycling bin next to the chair. It landed with a hollow clatter. "Go on inside," I said. "Get your bags. Your wife is waiting for you. Go. Start your life." Tyrell stood up. He squeezed my shoulder. "What are you going to do, Dad?" he asked. I leaned back in the chair and looked up at the first stars appearing in the night sky. I thought about the empire beneath our feet. I thought about the accounts in Zurich. I thought about the power I held in my calloused hands. "Me?" I asked. I smiled, a slow, secret smile. "I am going to sit here and finish this beer. And then I have to go downstairs. I have to figure out what to do with the next $2 billion. Tyrell laughed. He walked inside the screen door, slamming gently behind him. I sat there alone in the dark, the richest janitor in the world, content in the knowledge that the trash had been collected and the kingdom was clean. Life taught me that the shiniest things are often the hollowest. Richard Kensington had everything the world admires, money, status, influence, but he lacked the one thing that actually matters: substance. He thought dignity was something you buy with a credit card, but I learned that dignity is what remains when the credit card is declined. We spend so much time trying to impress people who do not care about us, forgetting that true power comes from knowing who you are when the lights go out. Never let anyone define your worth by the clothes on your back. Sometimes the most valuable treasure is hidden in what others throw away. If you believe that respect is earned, not bought, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories from the underground. Let me know in the comments. Have you ever been underestimated by someone who thought they were better than you?